Welcome back to We Move Through Stormy Weather, a Phish podcast by Storm Sound and Osiris Media. I am very, 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 very excited to be here today for, I believe, episode 29. This is a very, very special episode. This is the second year in a row that we're doing this. I'm very, very happy to have two We Move Through Stormy Weather alumni, Brian Brinkman and Justin Bruce here. Hello.
Hi, guys.
What up?
And we are here to break down the Phish Jam of the Year 2022 bracket. We've got 64 songs that have been picked by the community, and we're giving you this breakdown, if you will, as kind of a preview to the actual bracket itself, which will be voted on over on phish.net on the forum there. So I'll give a little bit of information about that if you're interested in participating. Starting Monday, January 30th, 2023, on the phish.net forum, 4 matchups each week will be up for vote. Each voting round lasts from Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time until the following Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. There will be a new thread on the forum for each week's voting thread. More information will be available on how to vote, and obviously who to vote for is available on the forum there. If you would like to get your own copy of the bracket, fill it out yourself, see what this is all about, you can head over to ryanstorm.substack.com. There's all the information about how to get involved, some statistics about the bracket, fun stuff, and places you can download a printable version on there. There are links to playlists for Live Phish and phish.in. If that's your kind of thing. So, without further ado, who's ready to dive in?
I am ready.
I'm ready. Jinx.
Both ready. Good unison. Perfect. All right. So obviously, a very significant moment of 2022 was the whale gag in April. And so we decided to go with whale names for each of the regions. Shout out also, sorry, I didn't say that in the intro. Shout out to the amazing bracket committee on phish.net. We have a group of a bunch of people who help put these together every year. People who accept all the seedings and send out the spreadsheets and stuff. Amazing group of people. So kudos to them. So we are going to start with the Willie region, which is in the top right. These are the first matchups that are going to be up starting January 30th. First matchup of the bracket, obviously going to be pretty much a blowout because it's a 116. But we've got the Deer Creek Sand at a 1 seed against the 1229 Everything's Right at a 16 seed. We're going to talk a little bit about some of these MSG jams, I think a little bit later, but I feel like this Everything's Right is a little bit underseeded. I think it's definitely above 16 level.
Yeah, I would have this somewhere around, I don't know, like a 10 or 11 seed. I think it's a really strong Everything's Right in a year that wasn't particularly huge for the song.
Especially after 2021.
Yeah, not necessarily as strong as 2021, but there were some really great versions. I loved everything that happened on the 29th and 30th of December this past year. This Everything's Right just speaks to the kind of wall of sound tray, but it's going up against the Sand that has a 10-minute sustained brilliant peak midway through it, which will also cause a great deal of controversy later in this conversation. So I will just say Sand wins this easily.
Sand wins it easily for me as well. Although, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe there's just a time lag, this Everything's Right is not even on the jam chart officially. At least when I was making my notes, it was
Have
not.
They put up the MSG jam charts already?
Maybe there's a lag. You would know more than I would.
There might be a lag.
However, I was struck in the Everything's Right by some sonic palettes that actually reminded me a little bit of like early 70s electronic Miles Davis. So that's all you need to know.
Ooh.
It was lovely, and I think, deserved to be a little higher than a 16 seed, but the Sand is a monster, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it as we go forward.
Yes.
I just want to say quickly, I just pulled up my list. I had this Everything's Right at number 39 in the year. So I liked it. It was kind of lower on my overall list, but what is that? That makes it probably like a 9 or a 10 seed.
Ish.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So obviously now our first very contentious matchup coming next. We have 8 seed 8-5 Ruby Waves from Atlantic City up against a 9 seed, the 719 Hallies from the Man in Philly. I went with the Ruby Waves here. This was a really coin flip matchup, as a lot of 8-9s tend to be. I don't know. I just felt that the Ruby Waves had a little bit more compelling improv to it. I absolutely love this Hallies. This was one of the few moments of the summer that I was able to catch live, and remember really, really enjoying it at the time. I just feel like the Ruby has a little bit of an edge over the Hallies here.
So I have Hallies at at 31 on my overall list, and I have Ruby Waves from 8-5 at number 35 on my list. So I think these are pretty accurately ranked. These are kind of middle of the pack of the year. I don't think you can really go wrong. I went with the Haleys. My justification to it is I think the Haleys is incredibly strong within the overall show. It has this very lyrical, melodic kind of focus to it within the main jam segment. It was one of those moments that really made you think early on in summer tour proper that we're actually in store for a really, really strong tour. Whereas the Ruby Waves, I believe that second set is the best set of the year to me. And this Ruby Waves is a really good part of it rather than a jam that stands out. So I ultimately went with the Haleys for significance and where it was placed and the overall melodic kind of direction of the jam.
And as far as these two, they were pretty close. For me, I went with the Ruby Waves, but I want to speak to the Haleys first. Is that a Canadian pronunciation, Ryan, when you say Hallies?
He got me to say Hallies as well. It just happened. I don't know.
I think I
Okay.
just pronounced it wrong.
That's okay.
Oops.
It's interesting. There's actually a common thread between these two jams in the Haleys. There's a moment around 11 minutes where Paige is playing electric piano, but he's also layering synths on top. It's kind of like he's doing two things at once, which is really cool. And then in the Ruby Waves, which is again the one that I went with, Trey is like getting a little peaky, and he kind of turns that into layers, and then he starts soloing over the layers. So Paige and Trey both kind of doing double duty in each of these jams. But I thought that the Ruby Waves ended up peaking harder and was just kind of really went for it. So that's the way I rolled, and also agree, really, really great Phish show in Atlantic City on night one.
Unbelievable show.
Now we're going to talk about set of the year kind of deal a little bit later, as some of my picks for set of the year pop up as well. Spoiler alert: it's from much earlier in the touring season. Ooh. All right. Next matchup, we've got the 421 Tweezer from MSG up against at a 5 seed up against the 12 seed 531 Light from Charleston. Charleston was a really interesting run in this in spring tour. You had these few like really big jams, like the Simple, the Set Your Soul Free, the Light, and there's not much else. It's really interesting looking at spring tour, also because the Alabama run was like really strong, like amazing 3 shows. And then Charleston, they kind of went down a level, and then Deer Creek, they went down another level at least in terms of full show construction. Obviously the best jam from that week, I mean, Brian doesn't agree, but one of the best jams from that week for sure is the Deer Creek Sand, coming from the last show of the run. But it's really interesting looking at how, in terms of show construction and set construction, they kind of went downhill as the run went on. I think this Tweezer takes this matchup for me. Besides the fact that I was at MSG in April, this is just pure and emotional. Like, it's just a beautiful, beautiful jam. The way that Mike initiates the modulation out of that like kind of Your Pet Caddy groove into this just like soaring and beautiful jam. You've got Paige laying down the whirly. It's just amazing. I wish it would have gone on longer. But I had a great time at this show too. There have been a lot of people on Phish.net kind of ranking this Tweezer as like their favorite jam of the year, or like top 5 jam of the year, whatever. I wouldn't go that far. I think it is a little bit overseeded here, especially given it's only 14 minutes, which obviously quality over quantity in certain cases, but I think at a certain point you have to look at length. And so I don't have it going any further than 1 round.
So my first upset of the overall tournament is the Light here.
Mm.
And looking at my rankings, I actually have the tweezer above the light, though not by much. I have the tweezer as a 40 as my 40th best jam of the overall year, which puts it in like the 10 or 11 seed range. I have the light as my 49th best jam of the year. When I was listening back doing an A/B test on these, though, the light just it feels a bit more organic. It feels like they find this direction that they just keep pushing on. Um, I kind of love how Trey just refuses to go into passing through,
Yeah.
even though Mike is begging him to. And they wouldn't go into it for another couple of shows, but I love that. And then it goes into Mountains in the Mist. I think the tweezer's good. I think it's kind of one of those things, though, that they lock into a really nice segment, this kind of faux your pet cat, but if it's not going to do anything beyond that, if it's not going to challenge that idea, and one of the, we're going to talk about this with the bigger jams of the year, when Phish doesn't challenge kind of a segment of music that they find and figure out whatever's next, I find I go back to it as like a nice musical moment, but it doesn't do anything for me beyond that. And so I felt like because the light has a bit more challenging elements to it, while also really being beautiful and really pushing itself forward, it was an easy win for me to go into the next round, even though it's not going to go any further than that.
And these jams for me were both pretty similar, in spite of their 5 and 12 seeds. But yeah, have to mention how in the Charleston Light, Mike is begging to go into passing through, and Trey, I know Trey heard it. He's a musician. I know that he was aware of what Mike wanted, but he was not having it.
Hmm.
But for me, ultimately ended up going with the tweezer. I really like how Mike played a role in the jam, and even though it doesn't get into insanely hooked up territory, I like how Mike pivots the jam after the 7 minute mark and how sublime it is. The your pet cat touches are nice. It's just a really pretty jam, and I like how economic it is and how Trey kind of rides his sustain to sort of bring it home. So I
Hmm.
scored the tweezer a little higher than the light.
Yeah, I don't think they've played Your Pet Cat as many times as they did in 2022 without actually playing it. It's everywhere. Next matchup, we've got the 724 Hartford Sigma Oasis at a 4 seed up against the 730 Set Your Soul Free at a 13 seed. This was an easy matchup for me. I absolutely love the Hartford show. Yes, the fourth quarter might be not that strong. It has some of the best jamming of the year. We'll get to obviously the best one a little bit later. It's ranked a little higher, but I love this Sigma Oasis. I may take it over its Atlantic City counterpart to be my favorite version of the song. I think it gets a little bit more done in a little bit less time, which is again where the quality over quantity discussion comes into play. But I love this jam. I have it advancing a couple of rounds and eventually losing to the Deer Creek Sand.
Yeah, I've got the Sigma winning really easily here. I think that the Set Your Soul Free is quite good. I have it on my overall top 64. It's 55, so it's fairly accurately ranked here. This Sigma Oasis, though, I went back and listened to this in preparation for this matchup, and I was just blown away. It's a jam, to your point. I don't think a lot of people are talking about it. The AC one was so bombastic, so big. This one precedes. This one's stuck in the middle of a very blah set list in set one. Although you've got a really good Breath and Burning a few songs earlier, but this whole show is all about that third quarter. And so I think that this gets overlooked in the same way that the Blaze On from 12/30 2019 did. You got that big tweezer, the kickoff set two. Set one has this beautiful 17-minute Blaze On that just nobody talks about as a result of it. So I've got this Sigma going to the round of 16, similar to you losing to the Deer Creek Sand there.
And this is my first big upset of this
My
particular
Ooh.
bracket.
goodness.
I scored all of the jams that I listened to on like a 1 to 10 scale, and I had the Sigma as a 7. Mike is doing great, low end melodic work. It organically kind of grows. It's happy. It's upbeat. Thanks to Trey. I had it as a 7, whereas the Set Your Soul Free was a 7.5 for me. I just kind of thought it was busier, but in a good way, and that Everyone's kind of meshing together, gels for a nice finish with that great segue into Llama. And it was just a little darker, kind of a little more exploratory for me, but with Paige and Phish kind of balancing things out with a little bit of lightness. So for me, it was a 13 seed taking the 4 seed. So I went Set Your Soul Free.
Interesting.
Freaking Morehead State beating Michigan or something like that. My goodness.
It always happens.
Always
There's at least one
happens.
or two upsets.
There's always one or
sports
two.
joke.
It's amazing.
I understand.
Hey, we're doing a bracket here.
Yeah, if anybody listening couldn't tell, Justin has a much more meticulous ranking system than Brian and I do. I think we have a top 64 here. Brian, you may have more than 64, but Justin, it always impresses me the level of detail that you come at this with.
It always impresses me that I'm talking to, and I say this out of love, but I'm talking to 2 Phish rainmen who can remember everything, who can cite dates. I vaguely recall that I had breakfast earlier this morning, so if I don't write it down and have a system in place,
you had breakfast in the middle of the night, man. Don't.
Well, that's probably why I've got to write it down, because of my wonky schedule. But
the man's going
rate,
on like 1,300 straight days without making a wrongful weather forecast, so we've got to give him something here, right?
Right, that whole "I'm wrong, but I still get paid." I'm not wrong.
The only correct meteorologist in the world.
Well,
right, right here on this Phish podcast.
There we go. Next matchup, we've got the Atlantic City Disease from August 5th at a 6 seed up against the Alabama Sigma Oasis at an 11 seed. Friend of the pod, Megan Gliona, has this disease as her favorite jam of the year. She was very excited the other day when I was listening to it. I love this disease. I love this disease. It was a lot better than I remembered it being when I went back to it, filling out this bracket. I was kind of like, whoa, like, I knew this set and this show was incredible, but wow, like this disease, I didn't remember it being 20 minutes either. I thought it was like 16 or 17. So really, really phenomenal jam. Blown away here. Obviously, I wish it had a better matchup in the second round. Unfortunately, it does not and will not be making it further than one round here. But wow, excellent jam. Great Sigma here. I'm going to keep talking about the 2001 tease from Phish in this jam that is not noted, but it's there. And this was the beginning of Sigma's big run of 2022. Second jammed out version after it got jammed out at Dick's in 21, and then didn't get jammed out again for a while. So love this jam. Still absolutely phenomenal, but this disease is excellent.
Yeah, this disease is there's a lot that's wrong with the seeding of this bracket. I just want to make that clear from the start of this podcast.
It's almost like a large group of people like voted and came up with like so results.
It makes you realize
happens.
that democracy is beautiful and terrible all at the same time, because you have to take everyone's opinion, and most people all together, their opinion is wrong.
We're lucky that we're not talking about the goose bracket right now, because I think you have stronger opinions about those seeds in certain spots.
When you leave one of the 5 best jams of the year off of the bracket, like, all right. So here's the thing. I have this disease as the 6th best jam of the year. I think that this is a 2 seed, no less. This should be the kind of jam that is making it to the round of 8, if not the final round. You're absolutely right. We're going to talk about it in the next matchup. Because of where it goes in the next round, this is not going to advance for me. But I think this is a brilliant jam. I also have the Sigma Oasis from 528 as the 30th jam of the year for me, which puts it around a 6-7 seed. So these 2 jams, to me, as I'm listening to them, they should be much higher. They shouldn't be matching up in round 1. It's a true shame that the Sigma Oasis is losing. What a huge moment early on in summer tour, spring tour, if you will. Second night of tour, they play this really cool set 1 the night before, or set 2 the night before. They come out, they play a near 20-minute Sigma Oasis. Like, every one of us was sky high at that point in time about 2022 Phish. This disease, it's the anchor of the best set of the year for me. I'll just keep saying that as these jams keep coming up. There's this just
the
total...
best set of the year does have a huge disease in it. I'm not going to refute that.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Okay, yeah. Because I was going to say banger. No, but
no.
I'll just say that there was I webcasted these shows, and my wife and I were watching them in our living room. Kids were all asleep. Television was louder than it should be at 10 o'clock at night, but like the camera just zones in about halfway back of the beach, and the lights are in those, they were doing that, the bars of LED lights, and it was that whole effect Kuroda had where it just would start in the center, would just like flicker off to the outsides of it. Such a cool effect, looked so incredible right as the band falls into the sweet emotion. Or no, what was it?
Midnight Rider.
Midnight Rider.
Yeah, it's
Sorry,
Midnight
thank you.
Rider.
The Midnight Rider tease, and Trey nails it, and it's slow and it's eerie and it's gooey, and I was just like, this is it right here. So huge bastardization to have this jam this low. I'm apologizing to everyone's ears out there who decided that this was not one of the 8 best jams of the year, but we got to deal with the bracket that we're given.
And this is an instance where I'll say I think this is kind of appropriately ranked. But I do agree. I really like this jam because we've got all the 4.0 tones and sounds and textures going on. Sometimes, and I did appreciate how galvanizing that Midnight Rider kind of theme was. It sort of gave the jam some direction at the tail end. But there are times where personally, like in my weird little Phish brain, where I think, okay, it's like a tiny little bit of a crutch when we stumble upon some kind of like theme or melody that's not our own. But it really kind of did this jam a favor and brought it home before it simmered down. So yeah, Disease for me all the way. And it was fairly easy, that choice.
Next up, I'm gonna let Brian go first on this matchup because I know this is a big jam for you. We've got at a 3 seed the Orange Beach Tweezer from May 29th up against the Split Open and Melt from Mexico at a 14 seed. Take it away.
So I've got these. The Tweezer is my number 4 jam of the year. I've got it as a number 1 seed, and I've got the Split Open and Melt from Mexico as a number 16 seed. It's my number 61 jam of the year. I love this melt. I'm of the mindset that you can't really play a bad melt in late 3.0, 4.0, just with all the tones and the sounds that the band brings forth. But the best ones just seem to go that much further, and I don't think we got a true melt experience here in 2022. But this Tweezer, man, it's dissonance, it's noise, it's weird, it's dark. It kind of terrifies me at times. It's my favorite moment from the spring tour. And I think it's one of the strongest jams of the year. It's held up for me on multiple listens. This is going to go far for me in my own personal bracket. I don't know how far it's going to go for the larger community because of a few matchups I can foresee. But I had this, being one of those, a 3 versus a 14 seed. This is like Kentucky winning like 75-37 type of thing where you're just like, it wasn't even a game. They're going on to the second round.
And I had this Tweezer scored, just my personal scores, as the second best jam of this bracket. I gave it an 8 out of 10, whereas the Melt was just a 4 out of 10. So it was an easy decision. Love all the dark tones and sounds and layers. Anytime Mike's drill makes an appearance, that's usually a great sign for me. So yeah, it was fairly easy. And if I was in charge of seeding, I probably would have had this as the 2 seed in this bracket. So for me, this Orange Beach Tweezer is going to go a few more rounds.
Yeah, I love this Tweezer. I remember being blown away by it last spring when they played it. Absolutely phenomenal. I do really, really like this Melt too. Really interesting placement for this song too, because this was the Sunday night of Mexico during the first set, which means it was in broad daylight. And it's always interesting when you're on a beach, the sun's shining, and then they rip a jam like this. Crazy stuff. Really excellent melt, as you said, Brian. It's hard for them to play a bad melt nowadays with all the tools in their arsenal right now. But yeah, this Tweezer is a juggernaut. Demented Space a la End of the Chula Piper a little bit getting in here. So yeah, phenomenal. This one will go to the Elite 8 for me before losing to the Sand. I know you have it a little further, but we'll get there.
We'll get there.
We'll get there. Next up, we've got a 7-10 matchup. We've got the Simple from 423 at a 7 seed up against the Wave of Hope from June 4th at a 10 seed. This simple does include the Egg in a Hole because we on the committee have ruled that was not a full performance of the song, contrary to what is displayed on Live Phish, or I don't know what Phish.net has noted as right now. But we view it as an Egg in a Hole jam quote thing inside the Greater Simple Jam. So that is included.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love this simple. At the show, I think that this gave the show the boost it needed. It opened nicely. We had a Mike's Groove, but it was a little slow. In the beginning, the simple was pretty slow, but Phish really pushes the pace in this jam. Starts picking up, and then they get into the darkness, and the Egg in a Hole is just so fun. But yeah, I love this jam. Wave of Hope, again, much like the Alabama Sigma Oasis. This was the coming out party for Wave of Hope. This was the first big jam version being paired with, I think it was being paired with the Yem in this set. Also a great jam, but I just think the simple gets the edge here.
Yeah, and I had the Wave of Hope kind of riding the heels of the You Enjoy Myself and the post-vocal jam. Upbeat Pete, can't complain about it. I ultimately went with a Wave of Hope over the simple. Neither of these were all that high relative to the other jams in this bracket. Only thing I want to say about the simple Egg in a Hole simple is until Mike started, vocalizing, we've got it simple deep into the jam. It's a perfect matchup to go into Egg in a Hole. Egg in a Hole is like has a great uncle, and that great uncle is the song Simple. Like there's definitely a little bit of similarity going on there.
So I'm looking at my list here, and I agree with my decision on the bracket, but it is interesting to me. I have this simple ranked as the 18th best jam of the overall year. I have this Wave of Hope as, where is it, the 29th best jam of the overall year. I went with Wave of Hope, though, and my rationale for it is twofold. One, I think you're absolutely right, Ryan, from a simple standpoint, the way that it changes the course of that overall show. I thought it was a really good start. You had Fluffhead, Mike's Groove, and then you get this simple later.
Oh yeah, it was a Fluffhead opener.
It was a Fluffhead opener. It was just it was a great closing night to the overall run. The faux New Year's Day show. There's always an interesting chemistry around that type of show. We're going to get to a jam from that show later that I have going very, very far in this overall bracket. The one thing I hold against this simple, though, is I think that them finding Egg in a Hole here created this crutch out of these Sci-Fi Soldier songs that was not my favorite part of this year. It reminded me in a lot of cases of the way that they utilized Martian Monster or the Birds in the mid 2010s, where it was like, we don't know what to play. We're kind of vamping here. Let's go into this song. And personally, as a listener, I'd rather them just challenge themselves and push themselves further within the improvisation. So it's a me thing. A lot of people might disagree with that. I'm sure in the room, once I went into Egg in a Hole and everyone was going crazy, it was an amazing moment. But I have it losing to the Wave of Hope because the way that Wave of Hope at this moment transforms itself, it becomes the song of the year to me. And from here, we're going to get some of the best jams of 2022, some of the most forward thinking ideas in the same way that Mercury, Set Your Soul Free, Everything's Right proved themselves in years past, where the band would play
Rest in peace, Mercury.
Rest in peace, Mercury. I don't even think they know how to play it anymore. It's ridiculous. But the way that those songs really took the themes of the year that they were really excelling in and pushed those ideas forward, plus pushing that song forward. A Wave of Hope did that this year, and it all starts with this version.
Hell yeah. Very, very well said. We've got a big one coming up in a couple of matchups. But right now we've got the final matchup of the Willie region. We've got the 421 Chalk Dust Torture at a 15 seed up against the Blossom Free at a 2 seed. Obviously, this is no contest. It's a good Chalk Dust, solid, upbeat major key jam, but this Free, amazing. I love the decision to extend and jam out the end of the song instead of the jam section, which is really cool. Obviously, if I were in attendance or webcasting, the way that they kind of truncated the middle section, I would have been kind of like, we're it's gonna be one of these again where we're going through a bunch of songs. But then the ending they get into, wow, just this is 25 minutes, really really phenomenal stuff. Around the 20 or 22-minute mark ish, they get into kind of like a jam that really sounds just like a Type 1 Mike song jam, which is really cool for them to stumble upon in the middle of this. But yeah, I know. I love this free.
This is no contest for me. I have the free as a 3 seed in my bracket. It's the 11th best jam of the year, according to my ears. I don't have the Chalk Dust Torture anywhere near my bracket. It's a nice jam, but like they can't play Chalk Dust Torture. They literally cannot play Chalk Dust Torture. And I know that people can make the argument that, well, it's about the jam, it's not about the song. And hey, dude, aren't you like a giant 2.0 fan? Yes, all of these things are true. I understand you can just jump to the jam. I get that. I understand. But if we're talking about an era where the band does typically play their songs right, and we're talking about a jam vehicle like Chalk Dust Torture that has had so many just monumental jams over the last decade and a half, I can't see this version making it anywhere near the bracket. That's me personally. The free, though, on the other hand, we're talking about one of the most reliable Phish songs that had this weird reawakening in 2022 that I don't think anyone would have predicted. Even the non-jammed out versions, Orange Beach, Atlantic City, immediately come to
I'd
mind.
say Orange Beach counts as a jammed out version. It's shorter, but
Probably, yeah.
wow.
It's like a type 1.5 type of thing, but like
Yeah,
nothing like this. I mean, we haven't had a
grind.
free like this since literally fall of 1995. I mean, it was insane.
We haven't had a free like this since the fall of 2021. Are you forgetting
Oh,
Chula?
excuse me. You're right. There was a Chula Vista jammed out version. That
You were,
was,
come on,
I
Brian.
was there.
You
I was there.
you were the
It's like the
last
fifth.
person I would expect to forget about Chula.
It's like the fifth best jam of an amazing show. So it just, but like we haven't had a 20+ minute,
Yes.
near 30-minute jam since Landover 95. It just
Yes.
it's not something that
11:22.
the song does. And in listening back to this, that Blossom second set is incredibly sloppy. So I'm in slightly contradicting myself, but there's enough here to outweigh it. And this free will go to the round of 16 for me.
Okay, I do want to say that I actually had this 15-2 seed as a really challenging pick, which probably says more about me. Like I honestly scored the 421 Chalk Dust as a 7.5, and I ended up scoring the August 2nd free also as a 7.5. I know 15 seed versus a 2 seed. Maybe it's just in my brain, but I really loved the Chalk Dust, just how effortless, how uplifting. I love Page's cozy electric piano. Trey gets a little pokey with his peaks. Page is on piano. It just sounds classic and effortless, and the segue to Tweezer is just buttery for the icing on the cake for CDT. That said, I did ultimately end up going with the free. Just a lot happening, and just almost too much to turn down. So without getting too verbose, I rolled with the free, but I think the Chalk Dust is really underrated here. And then for my big pick, I did go with the Sand. I'm sure we'll talk more about that in a bit, but I just, sometimes long Phish jams are good because they're long. I thought this was a great Phish jam that had some length to it. So that's why I rolled with the Sand. Ultimately, the number 1 seed prevailed for me out of this Willie bracket, as it were.
Yeah, I have the Sand hitting my final four as well. I know, Brian's going to be the one with the dissenting opinions, I think, in a lot of different spots of this bracket, but you have something different.
I have the Orange Beach Tweezer. I squared it this way. I think when you match up those two jams against each other, the Sand does something that Phish used to do incredibly well. And while I love to see them still do it today, I don't think it's their strongest suit, and that is a sustained peak. There's this like 10-minute segment of this jam from about 18 minutes to 28 minutes where they're just peaking, and the whole entire jam segment is a peak, and it's amazing. And like when you go back and you listen to it, and to hear these guys in their late 50s jam with that kind of intensity, it's incredible to hear. It's also something that like to me, the best era of Phish doing that was 94 to 2000, with the caveat of like the SPAC Piper from 2004. So to me, you compare that against the Tweezer, where the last 6 minutes is this wall of sound, death spiral, just like you're overwhelmingly cascaded with sound and effects. That to me is where Phish is at their strongest right now. They have the tools, they have the know-how to play in this very nuanced style. It fits their overall pacing. To me, there's nothing like the 529 Tweezer this year. It's a very unique jam. And I just had it eking out. It'd be one of those classic Elite Eight matchups where you're just like, you're Duke, Kentucky, where it's just back and forth. And it's just like dudes are, laying out on the court and last second shots are sending us to overtime. And then we're going even further. We're going to another overtime. Like, it would be an intense matchup. I love both these jams, but for me, it's the Tweezer.
I'm now remembering we had these. I'm pretty sure you guys were dropping all these sports analogies in last year's episode too. But
well, look, I'm going to say if
we're
trying to find the best jam of the year, we are combining sports with Phish.
It is a bracket, as you said. All right, moving on to the Monstro region here. We've got the 1 seed Hartford, A Wave of Hope, up against a 16 seed, the Dicks Walls of the Cave from September 3rd. I just want to say that I think this Walls of the Cave is underseeded. I love this jam. Really, really aggressive. I love that we've gotten a couple of jammed out Walls of the Caves this year or last year. I think the song has definitely gotten a little bit stale over the course of 3.0. Kind of like, okay, it's 10 minutes, close the set, whatever. There are a few extra mustardy versions. But outside of that, there hasn't been anything interesting. So seeing them start to jam it out again is excellent. They get into a great space here. But man, this Wave of Hope, this is my number 3 overall for the whole year. I mentioned before how much I love the Hartford show, and this is the centerpiece of it. We were talking about a lot leading up to this. The clean Trey jams versus the very effects laden jams, and this is one of those where it's like you get into that grime, into all these effects, but with Fishman just aggressively pushing too, which is one of my favorite jam spaces that they've really developed over the last couple of years. You get Page leaning into the synths and Trey leaning into the synths and the delays and the stuff, and Phish is just pushing the pace. And so this jam is just incredible. And the return to the song is not bad.
Not at all.
There were a lot of pretty solid returns to the proper song forms from Trey this year, which I feel like we need to acknowledge because that was not the case often last year.
I do feel like, though, for every really well executed return to the song, there was at least one really bad.
It turns out that Ghost is just impossible to return to. I'm not even thinking of a specific version, but it's always awkward and a little clunky when we're getting back into Ghost. But yeah, he pulls it off in the Wave of Hope. 2 things about the Hartford Wave of Hope that jumped out to me. I like that Page is doing a little bit of Hammond B3 work in this jam around 12 minutes. That's something we didn't necessarily catch a ton of in 2022. I really enjoy how Mike would occasionally ascend into this echoey upper register kind of playing. And I think that really adds a bit of a mood. And I guess a third thing to echo what Ryan was saying was that Phish is just pushing things forward. And Trey at the end of the jam just kind of escapes or steps out in front of this maelstrom. It's just noisy, but then he's able to get out in front of it, so it becomes more than just a noise jam. And yeah, for me, this Hartford Wave of Hope, the strongest jam, and definitely deserves the 1 seed in this Monstro bracket. Is Monstro the whale from Pinocchio? I'm going to put you guys on the spot.
I think so.
I'm blanking on this.
Monstro
I think
whale.
it is.
Yes. The 4th and final antagonist of Disney's 1940 animated feature film, Pinocchio. A gigantic sperm whale, infamous for swallowing anything in his path, much like this Hartford Wave of Hope.
It's
There you go.
It's this is a very, very good point, and good Disney Plus call out there, Justin. I know that you're probably on there early in the mornings, just like I am when my kids are
Dude,
awake and I need coffee.
got that. It's in my
That's
wheelhouse
right.
with a 4 and a 7-year-old. I'll tell you, we should do a bracket about Disney Plus
I'm
movies
into
and
it.
shows.
Um, this wave of hope is the monster of this side of the bracket for me. This is my number two jam of the overall year. The segment around 15 minutes to 17 minutes, you talk about the clean playing of Trey in certain jams, you talk about the effects laid in playing in other jams. This jam has both of those in one spot. He's on that synth pedal, but he's playing this very, very intentional, clear melody that sounds like Brian Eno. It's like he lifted something out of Another Green World in the same way that they did during the MSG Tweezer from 2019. It's beautiful. I remember listening to it the night of the show and just being like, because that weekend is so strong, the Bethel Hartford weekend. And then I remember listening to it the
Mhm.
next morning on a run and just kind of having to stop and just taking it all in. It's one of my favorite couple of minutes of music that Phish played in all of 2022. And I have this wave of hope going all the way to the championship game. It's an unbelievable jam. It's a huge testament to where the band is at. I don't want to overshadow the Walls of the Cave though, because I think I forget who said it, but one of you guys mentioned it seems underseeded.
Hmm.
I have it as a 13 seed, so not like one of the greatest jams of the year, but I definitely think that it could have an opportunity against a weaker 4 seed, if you will. It's a really natural jam. 9-3 was one of my favorite shows I saw in 2022. This capitalizes on a very strong first quarter of the show and really showcases a lot of the brilliance that's going to come with the way that the band is going to approach improv in the second set of the show. Not something that's ever going to challenge this wave of hope, but a good jam all to its own.
Hmm. Next up, we've got the 8-9 matchup. We've got the 12-29 Ruby Waves at the 8 seed and the 8-2 Cents at a 9 seed. This one wasn't particularly difficult for me. I went with the Ruby Waves. I really, really liked that 12-29 second set as well as the 12-30 second set. Just some really, really great jamming. This 12-29 Ruby Waves, you get into it. They're getting into that again. The Phish pushing the pace. Trey was really laying into this jam as well, and this brief heartbreaker tease, which was a lot of fun. So yeah, love this jam.
Yeah, this is one of those weird seeding matchups here for me. I have this Ruby Waves as the number 10 jam of the year, which would
Oh,
make it a 2 seed or a 3 seed in my bracket. And I have this Sense and Subtle Sounds as the number 54 jam of the year, which makes it somewhere around a 14 seed. I don't think it's really close here. The Ruby Waves, it's wall of sound, shoegaze, Trey playing one of my favorite newish Phish songs. Ruby Waves bats like 850. It's stunning what this song does. Every time it comes out, it's just an amazing version. The Sense and Subtle Sounds, similar to the Chalk Dust that we were talking about in the previous region, they can't play the song. They don't know how to play the song in this jam or this version, and it just I'm not going to put that on and sit through 4 minutes of the band not knowing how to play Sense and Subtle Sounds. I don't know if they couldn't hear each other on stage at the Blossom show, but there was some weird stuff going on with the sound. Trey looked very angry at John Fishman midway through this second set. I think
Oh,
he made a couple mistakes during Esther.
what is it?
Um, it just
1995.
ultimately it looked like that. He gave him this look. If you watch the webcast, there's like a clear moment that, hey, what the hell are you doing, guys? But I don't know. This Ruby Waves moves on very, very easily.
yeah, same for me. Ruby Waves all the way. I really like how Paige is working the clav in the middle of this jam, which I feel like, he's got a lot of other toys in the toy box, so that's kind of nice to hear. And it was a nice kind of return back into quasi Ruby Waves territory to finish this jam. I also like how this jam starts pretty noisy, kind of in that 4.0 industrial way. But there's like some melody going on. So we're not just committed to the noise. We're using the noise as a vehicle to get somewhere. So yeah, for me, it was the Ruby Waves, and it was fairly straightforward.
Mm-hmm. Next matchup, we've got the 226 Set Your Soul Free at a 5 seed up against the 1230 Golden Age at a 12 seed. I love this Set Your Soul. There's 5 of them in the bracket. That and Tweezer are the songs with the most entries in this bracket. But this starts off one of my favorite sets of the year as well. We've got the Set Your Soul, you've got the Cross-Eyed, you've got the Simple. Really, really phenomenal set from Mexico, and another awesome show. I really love this jam. Again, that industrial sound that you just mentioned, Justin, is all over this one. You've got that I don't know, machine beepy thing that I think Mike does. I can never remember if it's Mike or Paige, but this is great. I have it losing to the Wave of Hope after beating the 4 seed that we'll talk about in the next matchup.
That's funny because I actually, in my notes about this Mexico Set Your Soul Free, have mention of some boop boop beep beep tones. I thought they were coming from Trey, but I dig on those as well.
It's someone.
I ended up going up with the upset. These jams were kind of the same quality as far as I could tell to my ears, but I rolled with the Golden Age. I am guilty of being obsessed with Freddie King's song San Jose, and Trey is obsessed with San Jose.
Yes, he is.
It just has he's using it for so literally decades now that it's just when he doesn't know what to do, it's just like a Trey lick. It might as well be original to him at this point in time, but there's a little San Jose action around 8 minutes. This is a peaceful Golden Age. Mike gets a little industrial, but not like heavy. And this is actually the song, Brian, where I texted you, and at 13 minutes and 20 seconds, our boy Trey gives a nod to Panda Bear's Comfy and Nautica from, what is that, Person Pitch, the 2007 Panda Bear album.
Absolutely.
So I heard that, and just right away I got really indie music geeked out. And yeah, I thought it was fun. And then Phish kind of drives things home. We kind of flirt with the vicinity of peaks instead of just like fully frothing over, which sometimes, if it's not executed well, can be a little trite. So same quality, but Golden Age for me.
So I have this Set Your Soul Free winning quite easily and winning going until the round of 16. As you guys noted, the industrial approach is something that we're going to talk about it here more. It's really kind of my sweet spot for where Phish is at in 2022 and where I hear the best music that they play. The back-to-back run of 225, 226, where you have just monumental jams, great song selection, excellent flow. Those 2 shows are 2 of the best shows of the overall year. They kind of feel like a package deal to me, in the same sort of manner that 1229 and 1230 do on the flip side towards the back end of the year. But ultimately, like the last 6 or 7 minutes are so demented of the Set Your Soul Free that I just can't get enough of it. I want to admit a brief oversight. The 1230 Golden Age did not make my bracket. My rationale for that is similar to my rationale for anything from 8-5 set 2 that did not make the bracket, meaning that these are such strong sets that I think of them as complete sets rather than sets with individual jams. That said, there is a 1230 jam that makes my bracket. We'll get into that. I think actually 2 of them, but I think everything Justin said is dead on. This is a really beautiful Golden Age. At some point during this, I was texting with a couple buddies, and they were deep in the Golden Age after playing a 20-minute No Man in No Man's Land. And I was like, I think we're in for a really good set of Phish right now. It was one of those moments where like, it didn't matter what song they were playing. They just found themselves in a jamming space. So I just want to highlight that. I don't have the Golden Age winning. I don't even have it on my bracket. That's me. I'm wrong. I'll admit it, but it's a really good jam.
It is. Next matchup, we've got the 724 Song I Heard the Ocean Sing at a 4 seed up against the 422 Fuego at a 13 seed. This was I think we were talking about this yesterday. This was a great year for Fuego. 2022 was a great year for Fuego. Couple of good versions, especially when there haven't been as many noteworthy versions of Fuego in years. They've been few and far between. But this Song I Heard the Ocean Sing, again, following up that Wave of Hope from Hartford, you get into this jam and man, it's like excellent. You know, it's for lack of, really elaborate explanation. It's just a really, really, really good jam. I love it.
It's really, really good, and it feels like a little sedate, a little chill on the heels of the Hartford Wave of Hope. But then there's an inflection point around 10 minutes, and it ends up kind of surprisingly in like some clean, upbeat space for the last several minutes. So, yeah, I went Song I Heard the Ocean Sing. I will say, I listened to everything on the jam chart like through the year. Just took notes, and I listened to the to the Fuego, and I was like, I didn't even write anything down or score it. So for me, this was a Song I Heard the Ocean Sing all the way.
Yeah, I ultimately went with Song I Heard the Ocean Sing here. I thought that this was a really strong Fuego. To your point, Ryan, I think that this is the best year that Fuego has had since 2014.
Mm-hmm.
It's the most jams that made the jam chart since 2014, but also just in terms of the ideas that were coming out of this song consistently. Used to be so surprised when you heard a good Fuego. And you'd go years. There's a great version from the Forum, and then they don't play another great version until Banger the next summer. Before that, it was Jam Filled Night. Before that, there was a really great version from Mexico, but it was few and far between. 2015 has barely
Yeah, they were
any good
playing it a lot.
Fuegos. They were
Yeah.
playing a lot, and they didn't have a lot of meat on it. 2014 has this really great stretch of July 4th, July 8th, July 30th that are all stunning, diverse, unique versions of the song. Ultimately, though, it does not overcome the Song I Heard the Ocean Sing, which both in terms of the way that it jams and the diversity of the jamming, and also its position coming out of that Wave of Hope where you thought they needed a cool down song, but instead they ramp it up and they play a near 20-minute jam that's just as creative in a completely different way. That's just a sign of Phish being completely on.
Next up, we've got the 731 Tweezer at a 6 seed up against the 812 MoMA at an 11 seed. I've got the upset here. I really love this MoMA a lot. This Tweezer seemed a little bit more unremarkable to me when compared, especially with the other Tweezers on the bracket. I may be in the minority here, but I really, really love what they do with this MoMA and how they bring it back nice and clean at the end. Yeah, that's what I got.
The two things that stood out to me about this Tweezer, which is what I picked ultimately from MPP, was Mike and Trey kind of stumble upon organically this all along the Watchtower vibe.
Yes.
I doubt
Yes.
it's noted, but like you can
Yeah.
hear it, you can feel it. It's great. Just a little minor key kind of descending vibe. It's nice. It's a peaceful mid jam, and then it gets a little like arrhythmic to finish. And it reminded me of Summer 95 a little bit as far as a 4.0 perspective on what happened so many years ago. And the segue into Wingsuit's really nice. So yeah, for me, it was the Tweezer, even though, as you mentioned, there are many other better Tweezers from the year, but I like this one.
Yeah, it's Tweezer all the way for me. This may be attendance unbiased, but the moment dance is a nice moment. It was, I thought, one of the few exciting moments of the entire Alpine Valley run. Great to have a set one jam like that. But this Tweezer, to your point, Justin, it goes into this classic rock peak. I don't know if it's exactly all on the Watchtower, but I totally get the vibe you're going at there. And then it goes into this kind of Yola Tango industrial dystopian type of jam. It was one of those jams throughout the year that I kept going back to because it felt really unique. It felt really fresh. I've got this Tweezer as 28 overall throughout the year, maybe a little higher than a lot of people would have it. I think it's fairly accurately rated here. I've got the MoMA at where I've got it, number 37. So this would be a pretty close matchup here for me. Ultimately, though, I just go with the Tweezer.
All right, next matchup, we've got the 225 Carini at a 3 seed up against the 422 Light at a 14 seed. We have now reached the first jam from my favorite set of the year. Woo! I'm like in love with the 225 second set. Disease, Numberline, Carini, Song I Heard the Ocean Sing. 4 songs, absolutely incredible. Like, and we talked about we've talked a lot about in the last few days, going through our brackets, this kind of clean playing that we don't see a lot of, especially from Trey over the course of the year. Obviously, there's a ton of effects involved. And this Carini and the Disease, which we'll get to, very, very clean. This Carini to me is just like laid back. They're on the beach. Paige is on the roads. It's just like gentle, easy, major key bliss. And I absolutely love it. I have this Carini going all the way to the round of 8, upsetting the 2 seed in this region. I love it so much. It just puts me in a good mood. Phenomenal jam.
Yeah, I mean, so I have this Carini as a 2 seed, which I think would allow it to go a little bit further depending on where we were at in overall bracketology. It's an amazing moment. This set is brilliant. I remember about halfway through this Carini, I was watching the show at home with my brother and going, I think we're about to get a 4-song set. Like just looking at the clock and just hearing them continue to push ideas. I love the fact that the back end of this jam is essentially a Time to Flee jam, just slowed down. It's Trey's.
Whoa.
It's Trey's early nod to Goose in 2022, which is very fitting. I'm guessing he was listening to a lot of Goose in the winter as he was preparing night and day the same way he did for Fare Thee Well, as he was preparing night and day to sit in with Goose and then play with Goose later in the year. It's just it hits on a groove and on a jam that, to your point, Ryan, the clean playing really complements it. And you hear Trey for the first time really in 4.0 saying, hey guys, I don't need effects. I can still play guitar. I can still play a melody, and I can still take a couple chords and string them together and make a really cool improvisational segment. I don't have this light on my bracket, so I don't have a ton to say about it. I thought it was a good jam in a really solid second set in a very, very good show, one of my favorite shows of the year, but I don't think about it much more beyond that, especially when it's up against a jam like this.
Yeah, and with respect to the light, I enjoy how melodic Mike was. We talked a lot, or people have talked a lot about where's Mike in the mix. And I found listening to all of the jams from last year, kind of within a shorter time frame the last couple of weeks, that Mike came and went in the mix. There were shows where I was like, oh, there's plenty of Mike. There's all the Mike I want. Then there were other shows, like some of the Dicks shows, and then some of the MSG shows at the end of the year where I could have used a lot more, but I like how the MSG Light in the spring kind of starts off with melodic Mike and this minor key, and it's chill. It's kind of a fairly straightforward ascent, a little predictable, but the Carini, enjoyed it a lot. Anytime they're at the beach, I always think that I hear Trey kind of teasing a shipwreck sort of a vibe. I heard that at 13:30 in this Carini. Great little section of beauty that follows up. I like how early we talked about Trey playing cleanly. I like how Paige is supporting him on the synths kind of early in the jam. And I found throughout the year that if, Paige was synthy and Trey was clean, that almost had like a little bit more of total effect. Whereas when everyone was just doing the industrial sound. So this was a nice balance of all their tones.
Yeah, agreed. There's also a little Ain't Wasting Time No More riffage from Paige around the 12-minute mark or so. The chords that he's playing on the roads.
Just full of teases in this jam.
You know what? I remember streaming this. It was the night before Goosemas. Jake Silko and I watched this show in our hotel room at Mohegan. I remember like losing my mind, like trying to figure out what song it was that like Paige was reminding was. Like the next morning, like, I spent like probably half an hour like listening to like a 20-second block and just like searching for songs and being like, what is this? And then I finally figured it out, which made me very happy. Next matchup, we've got the...
It's so satisfying when that happens.
Oh, yeah. When you find the cheese. Next up, we've got the 12:30 Theme at a 7 seed up against the 8-7 Wave of Hope at a 10 seed. I love this Wave of Hope. I love this third night of Atlantic City. The Wave of Hope Yem pairing, again, the reversal of what we saw at Deer Creek earlier in the summer. Really phenomenal jam. I don't understand how it's possible to drop into Yem out of the end of this jam. Like, side note, this jam aside, like, that's not humanly possible. Like you can't just go from being in the jam space they were in to be like, all right, now we're gonna play Yem and on a
And to
dime.
play it relatively flawlessly, it's a
Yeah,
really
and no,
good intro to Yem. Like it's not like
yeah,
they're messing
like,
around like they did with the Chalk Dust and the Census All Sounds. Like this is tight, good Phish coming out of a
yeah,
really disorienting
and
jam.
they didn't even stop. Like they, Wave of Hope didn't fade out, and then they counted
Exactly.
in Yem. They're just like jamming, jamming, and Trey turns around and is like, okay, a 1, 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4, and then they're in Yem. So really impressive. But that's not part of this matchup. That's just something I wanted to talk about because it was really cool.
Context
This Wave
matters,
of
dude.
Hope
I'm right
is
there with you.
excellent. Thank you. But I went with the theme here. Could have been a coin flip either way. I love the couple of themes we got. Toronto and MSG last year, really great jams. I'm hoping that the trend of them being jammed out continues.
So this is one of those, from a overall ranking standpoint, I'm in total disagreement with the bracket. I've got the Wave of Hope as the 19th best jam of the year. I got the
Mm-hmm.
theme as the 41st best jam of the year. So I think the theme is good. I would have it as, what is that? That's probably like a 10 or 11 seed. This Wave of Hope I would have probably as a 5 seed. So I don't even see them matching up against each other. I ultimately went with the Wave of Hope. I guess it's an upset here. To me, it's a more accomplished jam. Um, Thematically, I really like when they find this dystopian space. It was one of my favorite moments of the summer. And I think to your point, Ryan, the way that they find closure to this jam and then jump into the Phish song that requires 8 minutes of, constrained, focused compositional playing is really, really impressive and has to be noted. The one thing I'll say about the theme, it's a very good jam. I returned to it shortly after the New Year's Eve run. It also took a 12:30 show that started with a really good disease, but then kind of tailed off for me and reasserted it as, okay, it's still 12:30. This is a very important night of the year. Basically, from the theme to the conclusion of that show was one of my favorite shows of the year.
Yeah, for me, I thought the theme was nice. It was nice on the heels of like that clean MSG Night 3, like Down with Disease to go into theme. It was nice to like not totally go industrial, but it was easily a Wave of Hope for me. I heard a little Shafty activity around about
Ooh.
8:40 in the Wave of Hope,
Mm.
and I like how it became a little upbeat Jedi session where we've got those sludgy tones, but it's still got a little bit of buoyancy. Although that said, this Wave of Hope jam in Atlantic City like finished in a bit of a sludge fest, which isn't a bad thing. That's not like a knock, but yeah, for me, it was Wave of Hope, and it was fairly straightforward.
All right. And then our final matchup of the Monstro region, we've got the 9-1 Piper at a 15 seed against the 726 Leaves at a 2 seed. Not a contest in the slightest. This Leaves is fucking incredible. Like in any of the other regions, I feel like I'd have it going a little bit further. I do have the Carini upsetting it in the Sweet 16, but I listen to this jam so much. Like it's just I always get to that first initial jam segment when they depart Leaves, and then I'm like listening to it. And I'm like, yeah, and then I look at the clock and I'm like, wait, we're only halfway through this jam. Like there's so much going on. It's like such an incredible space that they get into. The like very laid back synth textures. Trey's using his reverse delay at times. Like it's beautiful, and I hope Leaves gets this treatment. But this jam went a long way towards me being 100% sold on Leaves as a song.
Have you listened to the Maple version?
No, not in a
8117.
while.
I would recommend going back to that. That was actually the version that sold me on the song. It's it also it's like a Bowie song. It's really impressive to me
Right.
that they wrote a song like this at this point in their career. But I have this Leaves as the number 3 jam of the overall year. Um, I just remember being completely transfixed. I was sitting on my couch. I did not enjoy these Jones Beach shows. I thought that they were not good at all. They were
Except
disjointed.
for the first 2 jams of the first night's second set.
See, I've got some issues with the I never needed you like this before, which we'll talk
We'll get
about
there.
here. We'll get
Yeah.
there, but uh, I thought that this Leaves was stunning. It was an example, like the best moments of Phish this year, of them tapping into a very dark side of playing atonal, non really melodic, dystopian music, and crafting in a really beautiful way. So it was not a contest for me, even though I love this Piper. I think that this is very properly rated. I've got the Piper at number 57 of the year. It's kind of an underrated jam. Closes the second set, I think, for the only time ever in Piper's history. I'd have to double check notes on that, but it's a rare occurrence. It's just one of those classic, hey, we found a major key rock riff and we're going to take this to the fucking moon. But kind of similar to my take on Sand, it's not what Phish does best now, personally. So I have this Leaves going all the way to the final 8, the Elite 8, if you want to get all sports on us. Um, I have it just slightly ahead of the Carini. Very tight matchup again. If you want me to get into basketball analytics, I'm happy to, but I feel like Ryan is just starting to poke me out of that. I just will say
Boxing you
he's
out.
boxing me out of that. Oh, there you go, Justin. I like that. To me, this Leaves accomplishes more than essentially, any but 8 jams this year, if you will, and it's stunning to listen to.
And I have to admit, I slept on this Leaves a little bit. This is it. It took over the Piper. And I mean, we're talking about a 15 seed versus a 2 seed. What I liked about the Piper is it was energetic and fast paced. And I wrote in my notes, this was like the most energetic thing they had played in a while. So that kind of gave it a little bit of a buoy for me. I ended up, as I've mentioned, scoring all these jams on like a 1 to 10 scale. The Piper was a 7.5. The Leaves at first pass was an 8. I think I would probably bump that up a little bit more. I love how it goes from like rocking momentum that kind of comes up from underneath the basement and then around 10 minutes morphs into an upbeat synth drenched, easy for me to say, groove. I like how when we can like use that industrial darkness but to go in different places. So it was definitely the Leaves for me, but for a 2-15 matchup it was maybe a little bit closer than for other people.
Yeah. And I think we all have Wave of Hope making the Final Four from this region, correct?
I got it going all the way to the
I
final
do.
matchup.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Time for the Shamu region. We're going to go Shamu. We've got number 1 seed Bethel Set Your Soul Free from 723 up against the Atlantic City Yem at a 16 seed. Brian, talk about this Bethel jam.
It's perfect. It's everything I want to hear from Phish. It's
Your number 1, correct?
It's my number 1 jam of the overall year. It's my winner of the overall bracket. I don't see anything stopping it. There's nothing like it. It reminds me at its best of the Deer Creek Simple from last year. It came out of at the time, well, by the end of summer tour, this is my second favorite show of the year. Now it's number 3. I've got 12:30 slightly ahead of this show, but this is what I want from Phish always. I want to be terrified. I want cascading noises and sounds and weirdness and that 94 spirit of Phish to just like find itself on the stage. I think something really magical happens when they take the stage at Bethel. It's crazy to me that they've only played there 2 separate runs, 5 shows total, but this Set Your Soul Free has everything that I want. I thought it was deeply offensive when the conversation the next day was, well, actually it was Set Your Soul Free into Cross-Eyed because they teased Cross-Eyed. No, guys, let's let Set Your Soul Free have its day. It's like the Magna Ball Caspian. Like, let's let these jams, these songs have their day. Amazing Set Your Soul Free. It beats everything that comes after it. There's no difficult matchup for me. It's just a stunning performance by Phish at the absolute top of their game.
And you wish it had been attendance bias.
The tragedy for me of 2022 is I had tickets to Bethel and Hartford and I sold them to go to Alpine. And
Whoops.
I may never forgive myself for that. It's one of those, it's like missing out on, my wife gave me a free pass to go to Jam Filled Night and I turned it down because I had 2 days left at a job I was working at, and I wanted to be a good employee. And then I was like, they're never going to just like jam everything, right? And then they fucking jam sample, and I was like, you idiot.
Ah. Can't win them
That's
all.
Lessons.
can't win them all.
Fool me once, fool me twice. I will say that, yeah, the Bethel Set Your Soul Free, phenomenal jam. I scored this a 9 out of 10, which actually is what I ended up scoring the Deer Creek Sand as a 9 out of 10. So this is the cream of the crop. It is interesting. I feel like it is kind of a complete picture when you factor in the cross-eyed. Yes, there are like vocal cross-eyed callbacks, but it's because they're coming out of cross-eyed, and cross-eyed was like not short, but 16 minutes. But for me, the thing that stands out most about the Set Your Soul Free is how they are just playing as one organism, as opposed to so many other jams when you can follow along with the 4 parts, which is great, which is better than most music, which is why we love Phish, following all those 4 parts, interweaving and whatnot. But they are one organism here, and I really loved it. And you guys have mentioned Fuego had a good year. I get some Fuego vibes like in the last couple of minutes of this jam. It's got a little bit of a Middle Eastern industrial tinge, which
I get
I
that.
think
I
is
get that.
kind of, working off the heels of Fuego. So yeah, this is what I'm looking for
Yeah.
in a Phish jam. This You Enjoy Myself, not going to challenge the Set Your Soul Free, but what a great year for solid You Enjoy Myself, and
Totally.
what a great new tradition of having short vocal jams and then tacked on
Hell
jams
yeah.
afterwards. We should have been doing this the whole dang
Yeah.
time.
Seriously. Yeah, this yam gets to a fantastic peak, and I think you guys said everything there really is to say about this Bethel Set Your Soul Free. I love it. I have it at number 4 overall for the year. Yeah. Next matchup, we've got an 8-9. We've got the 7:30 Fuego up against the 12:30 No Men in No Man's Land. I really, really enjoy this No Man, the places they take it. When No Man gets the big treatment, it generally is very, very good. And we'll get to the best one of the year in our final bracket, or final region, if you will. But this is good. Again, another great Fuego. This is the better Fuego of the year, I think, in terms of big jammed Fuegos. But I ended up going No Man here. Either one loses to Set Your Soul handily in the next round.
Yeah, this was a tough matchup for me. I had these each scored as a 7.5, and initially I had picked the Fuego to advance, but I actually re-listened just this morning and gave the nod to the No Men in No Man's Land. It's just kind of refreshing sometimes to have clean tones, and we have a lot of that. Also, it's my contractual obligation to mention Trey teases San Jose early on in the
There we
jam because he
go.
doesn't know where he wants to go. So he figures, I'll lean on Old Steady. But for me, it was No Men's, and just a really nice, kind of serene, pleasant jam, all 21 minutes of it.
This was equally a very challenging matchup for me. I'm just looking at, I notated where like the really hard matchups were. This region here, the Shamu region, has 4 matchups that I struggled with, and I had to kind of do a bunch of A/B testing back and forth, which I think that's a good thing. That's what you want out of an overall bracket. It's interesting. So I had the No Man and No Man's Land originally ranked in my bracket at at number 14 of the overall year, which would probably put it at that's a 4 seed. And I had the Fuego at 33 overall in the year. However, I picked Fuego to win, and my justification for this, as I was listening to this, the Fuego does more with demented dystopian type of sounds, whereas the No Man is this very clean, ultimately peaking jam. And kind of like what I was saying with regards to 8-5 and 12:30, these two second sets to me are they're more than the sum of their parts. It's about the overall vibe and the overall flow, and the fact that kind of like 12:30 18 was, jams upon jams. Once they get into a jam space and then they move into another jam vehicle, they're already in it, so they're basically just playing the song and then going into a jam. This set does that perfectly, and I love it. But ultimately I have this Fuego going on and then losing dramatically to the Set Your Soul Free.
Right,
Dramatically.
as it should. I did want to mention the Fuego. Did you guys hear? kind of deep into the jam, around 14 minutes, it's to me sounds like a Wave of Hope jam, where it gets into this syncopated kind of upbeat space, and then it morphs into like an Axela
Mm.
jam. At least to my
Yeah.
ears, it did. I don't. For me, whenever I love that, and it's great music, but sometimes like internally, I knock it down a peg when I'm like, oh, okay, we're doing this thing or we're doing that thing, as opposed to exploring like brand new territory, said the non-musician who's never improvised on stage.
That's a
Well,
fair
yeah.
point. That's a very fair point. I think that I would usually knock something like that down. I think I built it up just because the nature of where it comes out of musically, I tend to prefer. But I think it's a really fair piece of criticism. I also will say, 12:30 is one of the best shows of the year. 7:30 is not. The Meriwether Post run is not one of the strongest runs of the overall year. But this Fuego, like the Tweezer before, these aren't jams that are moving deep in the bracket, but I think that they showcase really high highs in a lower valued run.
I will say before we move
Yeah.
on, real quick, this 2022 is the year where I stopped caring about Phish shows in their entirety and ranking Phish shows as a whole picture,
Hmm.
and I finally just said, whatever, let's talk about the jams. So while
It's
I
gotta
agree with
it's gotta
you,
happen eventually.
yeah, and it just makes life a little easier to cherry pick things, but I just needed to get that out there.
Sure.
I'm still a
Next.
full show guy. I just want to say, and if 2023 Fish features a lot of really good shows, I think you're going to find it easier to rank full shows. I think it's a year thing rather than a you thing, but we'll test that out.
Okay.
We'll
That sounds right.
talk while we're sitting in section 129 at Dick's this year.
Yes, exactly. I look forward to it already.
Yes. All right. Next matchup, we've got 5 seed 1229 Bathtub Gin up against the 12 seed 527 Chalk Dust Torture. I went with the upset here. I think this gin is way overseeded. This gin is great. Don't get me wrong. Part of an amazing opening segment to the 1229 show. Fluffhead, Your Pet Cat, gin, but it didn't strike me as like worthy of a 5 seed at all. In this Chalk Dust, again, we get that aggressive effects jam kind of thing, which I absolutely loved. So phenomenal jam here. I go Chalk Dust. I don't think it's particularly close.
I went with the upset as well. And, again, just to be a total hypocrite here, I'm looking back at my original rankings here. I had the 1229 Gin as the 22nd best jam of the year. I think I would knock that down quite a bit if I redid this. And I had the 527 Chalk Dust Torture as the 53rd best jam of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Or excuse me, the 43rd. But I have the Chalk Dust winning. It goes back to a lot of points I've made throughout this ballooning episode, where they get into this dystopian space and it really works and it really is exciting and it's a very unique take on Chalk Dust. I think also, I don't know how much you guys value this, but like for me, when I'm thinking about what about this jam versus another jam, this is a fourth quarter 18-minute Chalk Dust Torture that cements one of the stronger sets of the overall year. That means something to me. When they play this, if they played this to open the set versus late in the set, there's a bit more weight for me in terms of this performance. I will just say, though, this Bathtub Gin, it's the most fun I had with Phish in 2022. I had gotten to a point by the end of the year where I was like slightly disappointed. I didn't go into this New Year's run really expecting a lot. And by the end of this gin, I was in my living room dancing around with my kids. The music was turned up insanely loud. We were all laughing. We were all like hugging and dancing. It was just like a pure Phish family moment. One of my favorite things of the entire year, but does not do enough to overcome this Chalk Dust.
I was also pleasantly surprised with the end of the year, like
Very
New
much
Year's
so.
run. Didn't have many expectations, but me and my wonky schedule, I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and put on last night's show, and was just pleasantly surprised with each and every night. I have both of these scored similarly. There is a hilarious amount of ride symbol from Phish happening in this MSG gin. I wondered if I was just not in on the joke. but that was notable for me. It feels like there are twists and turns, but that they have some kind of commonality, and there's like a little bit of purpose versus when we're just looking for ideas. And the high energy sort of jamming at the end after they've already teased and hinted at going back into gin was kind of bonus. But ultimately, I did go with the Chalk Dust Torture. It's exploratory. It feels kind of like post peak, as just relaxed and patient noise
Yeah.
exploration, which even in my notes, I was like, I bet Brian would like this jam, and I like this kind of music. And the sum is greater than the parts here in this Chalk Dust Torture. So I was pleasantly surprised by the Madison Square Garden run at the end of the year, but I was also super pleasantly surprised by what went down in Alabama
Yeah.
on the beach in the springtime. So that's the way I went.
Never miss an Alabama beach show. That's what we've learned.
My brother was at those
Apparently.
shows and he was like, "This is the most undersold Phish show I've ever been to in my entire life." It
Awesome. Good for
must
them.
must have
Wow.
been like when I went to Pine Knob in 2014 and I just bought a ticket at the gate, 8th row. There was nobody there, and Phish did not play a
Wow.
show as good as these Alabama shows, though. So
I've been to Orange Beach,
Number 14.
Alabama, but unfortunately for family vacation, had a great time. Shout out to my Louisiana relatives. Orange Beach is wonderful, but I've never seen Phish there. But man, they are really kind of pleading their case.
Yeah.
Maybe need to make it down
No
there.
kidding. Next matchup, we've got the 226 Wolfmans at a 4 seed up against the Bethel Sample in a Jar at a 13 seed. Now, if somebody told you when you were first getting into Phish, or even 7 years ago or 10 years ago, whatever, that there would be like multiple 15-minute versions of Sample in a Jar in a year. Like that's kind of what I've been wrestling with all year. Is like if somebody told you that like they're going to be reliably jamming Sample in a Jar, like, you know, to one of these to someone in like 1994 when Hoist was coming out who like hated the song, being like, yeah, no, this is going to be a jam vehicle in 25 years.
Yeah, I remember having that same type of thought on August 7th, 2015, when they opened up the second set with Chalk Dust Torture, into Tweezer, into the Lizards. And I was just like, go back to 1994 and tell a fan that Chalk Dust Torture is going to be a brilliant jam vehicle. It's going to figure out a way into Tweezer, which is going to figure out a way into the song that ushers us into Gamehenge. It's one of those things that, like, there's all these what ifs with Phish history. And I think one of the greatest is, you know, what if they didn't come back in 2009? And what if they called it and they all kind of went in their direction? One of the guys didn't feel it in the '08 conversations.
Mike.
Yeah, exactly. The guy who doesn't want to be on stage most of the time. You know, we would have not only missed out on like people like Ryan getting the chance to see Phish and see as many Phish shows as he did. I mean, I finished 2.0 with 8 Phish shows. I'm almost at 100 now. Like the amount of music, the amount of friendships, the amount of life experience I've gotten out of this band. But from a musical standpoint, it's these things like Sample in a Jar becoming a jam vehicle. And it's one of the most absurd aspects of Phish history, but it's beautiful. That all said, this is not even the jam from this first night of Bethel that I have on my bracket. My 64th jam of the year is a Golgi Apparatus, which has 90 seconds of jamming. But baby, that is a great 90 seconds of
So
jamming.
good.
That is
It's
one
so
of my
good.
favorite things that happened all year. I have the Wolfman's Brother very easily winning this, as well as winning against the Chalk Dust Torture and moving into the round of 16. First set, 22-minute Chalk Dust Torture that just goes off into
Wolfmans.
Wolfman's, that goes off into ethereal space. It feels weightless. It feels like summer 1998 at the Lemon Wheel. It's just beautiful, beautiful jamming.
That's a beautiful analogy.
It feels like the ambient jam. It's just this, like, everything
Yeah.
drops out. I love this Wolfman's when it happened.
So much space.
So much space. It was a moment that felt like 2021 had never ended in the best way possible. I feel like the Phish community is the only community in the entire world that's like, man, I'd go back to 2021. That was a good year.
No, it's like the only community in the world that was like, man, like, can we lock them in their apartments for another year and a half?
Right.
And then like
it's us and the Milwaukee Bucks fan base. Like, we're the only people that are like, just take us back to 2021. But I love this Wolfman's as much as I love what they're doing with Sample. This Wolfman's does it.
Yeah, and for me it was the Wolfmans, and I'm with you. I actually had the Wolfmans going on to the Sweet 16 and beating the Choctaws Torture that we talked about a little while ago. But yeah, Wolfmans, it's beautiful. They were playing their butts off in
Oh
Mexico.
man.
Yeah.
When I started listening to all the 2022 jams, I was like, did I sleep on this year based on how exciting a lot of these Mexico jams were? As far as the sample is concerned, it's also a very sweet jam. I think both of these are just very pretty pieces of music. And to give a shout out to Tom Marshall, you guys talked about how it was decades into samples existence before it, kind of jammed. And here we are looking for sample jams. It was decades before I really appreciated the line "soon end up, end up." Like I just thought, oh, they were just repeating "end up," but like, think about it, man. It's
Think
actually
about
some
it,
very clever
man.
songwriting.
It's
Yeah.
deep, man.
That's
Have you ever heard sample thinking about it though?
that's similar to I used to hate the song more, and it made me cringe. But the line "it's never really over, even when it's over," I was like, once I
Beautiful.
realized that, I was like, holy shit! It blew my mind, and
Yeah.
now I love hearing that song.
I'm an unapologetic Moore guy. I actually love the song, but
Me too, which is why I think I'm secretly Canadian
yeah.
inside
Also,
because
just for the
It's a
I'm
good
all
record,
label.
mushy.
when they play
Yeah,
more when they
exactly.
play more at a show, even if it's like a second set closer, like people you would not know that everybody hates the song. 'Cause
It's
everyone's
Just
singing
because like
along and having a great song.
17 people on Twitter can hate more, that doesn't
It's
mean that
true.
it's not
When
actually
when you put
phenomenal.
20,000 Fish fans in a venue, they're gonna sing along.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah,
it's
this Wolfman's is incredible. They take it at a very gooey pace, which some may see as slow, but and it kind of feels slow for the song portion. But then when they get into the jam, as you mentioned, Brian, it just opens up. Like there's so much space for Trey, for Paige, for Mike, while Fish is just like holding down this, very relaxed beat. Really phenomenal. I remember, this happened while Goosemas was going on. And I remember checking my phone at set break and being like, okay, let's see what Fish is playing. Oh, a 22-minute Wolfman's. Like they haven't done that in decades. And hearing that, the next day for the first time, just being floored by it. Yeah, amazing. Next matchup, we've got the 422 Set Your Soul Free at a 6 seed up against the 1228 Wave of Hope at an 11 seed. Having been in attendance for both of these jams, definitely Set Your Soul Free here. Brian, you mentioned earlier how great this set is. The faux New Year's Eve show. We've got the Set Your Soul Free Fuego Light from this set, all in the bracket. Really excellent jamming. And the Wave of Hope is great too. I just felt like they're a little bit more synced up in the Set Your Soul Free, a little bit more compelling, if you will.
So I went back and forth on this more than any other matchup in the entire bracket. I actually initially picked the Set Your Soul Free to go all the way to the round of 16. And then I
Ooh.
re-listened to the Wave of Hope and said, you know what? I'm going to once again prove that my initial rankings are meaningless because I had the Set Your Soul Free at a number 13 overall this year. And I had the Wave of Hope as number 36. But I ultimately decided to go with the Wave of Hope, which again, I have it being a huge upset in the next round as well. It is the lowest seed to advance. It is the only above 8 seed to advance in my overall bracket beyond the round of 32. I think this is a grower jam. I did not. I liked it on 1228. I liked it on re-listen. It didn't totally blow me away, but as I've listened to it more and as I listen to it in context with what happened on 1229 and 1230, I think it's an incredible foundational jam. It feels like a slight transition to a new approach for the band. And the segue into It's Ice. Granted, we're not counting It's Ice for this, but the fact that they're in the middle of this very cacophonous kind of polyrhythmic jam and Trey stumbles upon the riff and they're able to make this segue without much effort, just did it for me. So I also went back to listen to Set Your Soul Free, and there was as much dystopian type music as I recalled off the top of my head. It was much more of a rock peak jam, which if you've gotten this deep into the podcast, you've probably understood that like that's not really where I'm looking to hear Phish at this point in time. So again, it's a me thing. It's not a you thing. It's not a Trey thing. It's not a musical thing. It's a me thing, but we're ultimately, this is in service of our own interests and in service of our own preferences.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I think the commonality between the spring MSG Set Your Soul Free and the Wave of Hope in the at the end of the year at MSG is that Page is really flexing in both of these jams. He's got all sorts of tones going, some I thought I heard like some Baby Elephant Walk electric piano in the spring, some Moogie action, some Mellotron action, but it does become kind of a bit of a trite rock peak to my ears. I scored the Set Your Soul Free is like a 5.5, whereas I scored the Wave of Hope as a 7.5. The
Ooh.
segue into Ice, to echo Brian, is fantastic. Also, gotta mention, Trey is dabbling in San Jose territory early as he figures out where to go, but his friend Paige actually leads him along. Trey really shines here, and that encourages Trey to go on some fast, like Pink Floyd-esque runs midway or toward the tail end of the jam. And I think this is just Page kind of doing good work. So for me, it was a Wave of Hope. This was one of my upsets, Wave of Hope being the 11 seed to get into the Sweet 16, but also want to go back a couple of brackets and shout out I had Set Your Soul Free in the Willie bracket and the Golden Age in the Monstro bracket. So I had a couple of double-digit seeds advancing to the Sweet 16, but I thought this was a super solid jam.
Just San Jose Bruce is what we will call him now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you listen to Trey and tell me if he's not literally playing San Jose
Constantly.
like every fourth or fifth song.
Always.
You're the only one who's still tracking it. It's amazing. It's impressive work.
Like it's not even a tease anymore.
I've just absorbed it the same way
smart.
where I'm like, oh yeah, those French fries have salt on them.
Yeah.
Like,
oh, that jam has San Jose.
I just kind of accept it. It's there. But there's Justin, just San Jose.
Right.
There it is.
Elbowing you in the ribs at Dick's, being like, "Did you hear that?" You're like, yeah, it was a Phish song.
All right, next matchup, we've got the 225 Down with Disease at a 3 seed up against the 8-6 Tweezer at a 14 seed. This one's not a difficult matchup. This is probably the 5th best Tweezer on the bracket by a fair margin. And as I mentioned, 225 set 2 is my favorite set of the year. I know I'm very curious to hear why you guys had it being upset going into the Sweet 16, because I have this one actually upsetting the 2 seed from this bracket to make it into the Elite 8. More of that beachy major key vibe. Again, that clean playing that we got a lot of at Mexico. I'm in love with this set. I'm in love with this jam. I love it.
I've got this Down with Disease as the 24th best jam of the year. So I think it's properly rated here where we find it. I don't have this tweezer on my bracket. I don't think I'm missing anything. I thought that 8-6 second set was a lower tier quality to the night before. It's a good jammy second set, but none of it blew me away. I want to just give a quick shout out to a few of my lower ranked jams that did not make this bracket. They include the 722 Golgi, the 810 Light, the 731 ACDC Bag, the 720 Simple. These are all jams that I think 729 Carini, I think would have been in this bracket in a better service to listeners than just another tweezer. I thought this was a good tweezer. It was quality, but it didn't blow me away in any sort of way. This Down with Disease is an absolutely brilliant, beautiful jam. It's up there with the best jams of the first half of the year, and I think it properly should be up there with some of the best jams of the entire year. The reason I have it losing to the Wave of Hope is I think by the end of the year, they had figured out this challenge of how do we incorporate melody with sonic experimentation. And the Wave of Hope really does that. The Disease from Mexico represents to me the band almost pushing against all of the success of 2021 and saying, can we still create improvisational brilliance without all of these effects? And they do it to great measure. But to me, then the rest of the year is this kind of battle, this push and pull between clean approach and a heavy-handed approach with effects. And they really nail in that Wave of Hope from MSG the kind of the mixture of those two. So that's why I have it upset in a different bracket, in a different setting. I think it beats a lot of jams, but ultimately it's a huge upset. It's University of Vermont somehow making it out of the first round, matching up against Kansas, and it's just University of Vermont hits like 10 threes in the first half and they run away with it.
I guarantee he's not going to hear this podcast, but the best basketball player from my medium town high school in South Central Pennsylvania played point guard at the University of Vermont in the early aughts. So shout out to Andre Anderson.
Andre,
But
I
yeah,
lost a
they
lot of
never.
money betting you guys. Okay.
I actually had both of these jams scored similarly. I ended up rolling with Down with Disease, but I thought as a 14 seed, the Tweezer kind of overperformed. It's not on the jam chart, but it's got some circular effects laden space early. It feels kind of chaotic, but also contained. So I was a fan of the Tweezer. Uh, the thing about the Down with Disease, and I think it's great, it has 4 distinct sections, whereas the best of the rest of the year jams almost feel a little more gelled and a little more like one piece, one sort of put together piece. Whereas this was like, all right, section 1, section 2, section 3, section 4. But, and I say this jokingly, anytime you've got a segue to number line, I mean, that's got to give you the edge, right? And that's what we had in the Down with Disease in Mexico. So I rolled with Disease.
That's great. And I do want to give a shout out to the 225 song I Heard the Ocean Sing, which didn't make the bracket, but that's
Very
an
good
excellent
jam.
Very,
Very
very
good
good.
jam.
It should have.
It should have. All right. Next matchup, which I feel like might be the weakest overall matchup in the whole bracket. We've got the 7 seed 1230 Always Wanted It This Way up against the 10 seed 420 Carini. I don't know why this Always Wanted It This Way is in the bracket. Quite frankly, I get really liking it. Very energetic way to close the set. Not something I'm going to go back to listen to really. And this Carini, opening up the April MSG run, solid jam. It's like 19 minutes, a little bit sloppy as a lot of that show was. But yeah, I go Carini here. It's the more interesting improvisation, but really not much else to say on this matchup.
What did you go, Brian? I'm curious here.
I went Carini. I don't have the I Always Wanted It This Way on my bracket. I think it's a great version of I Always Wanted It This Way, but it's not nowhere near a jam of the year bracket for jam for me. I have this Carini as the number 48 jam of the year on my original big old list. My original notes when they were playing this was I have no idea how Phish is playing music right now. And the reason I say that is when they walked on stage at MSG, their first time playing MSG since the pandemic, they have this great run lined up for the end of 2021 where the band has played this amazing year, one of the best years in Phish history. You can come at me. You can't at me. I'm not on Twitter, so maybe send me a freaking email and I'll engage with you. But yes, I will stand by 2021 was one of the best years of Phish history.
I'll back you up on that, which probably loses you some credibility.
They're going to bring up fall 2018 and then the whole argument's going to be out the window. But I do appreciate the support. I do. But that said, there's all this energy and tension going into this run. If you remember a year ago, we're not in lockdown, but Omicron is raging across this country and across the world. There were even fears going into February and March. Are they actually going to be able to even play at MSG? Our close friend Drew Hitz had a running Twitter account about the Knicks playoff chances because it would have screwed with the timing of a couple of the Phish shows. There was just so much up in the air. And then finally, we all find ourselves in MSG on frickin' 420. Like, come on, what a ridiculous thing to happen.
In MSG too.
Your first time in MSG, the band's first time there since 2019. And what do you open up with? A 20-minute Carini that, yes, it's sloppy as all hell. No, it is not moving on past the next jam in this bracket, but it is a stunning, stunning ode to energy, connectivity, and turning the volume up to 11 and just rocking the fuck out. And there's something to be said about that.
I actually scored the Carini as a 5 out of 10, and I maybe took some points off for sloppiness. I in my notes, I said that it feels like a good thesis jam for the year.
I like that.
But it doesn't get too heavy. It's got momentum, which works for me. It's full band, but it never like necessarily coalesces into anything transcendent. But a great start to the MSG run. But I actually went with I always wanted it this way. I think it totally deserves to be in the bracket, and maybe it's just because it's such a rarity to get. I mean, this is just a classic I always wanted it this way jam. It doesn't go into any like crazy territory, but I think that sneakily I always wanted it this way was like what Phish was going to end up doing years down the road,
Interesting.
years ahead of time. So for me, I just sort of went by the music that I heard. It's the original synth jam, right?
Mm-hmm.
It has a little bit of a Mr. Completely vibe. It's got a little bit of a cross-eyed energy to it. It's loud and loose. The jam almost gets away from them, but they're able to sort of corral it. So I just listened to my ears and I rolled with I always wanted it this way. Shout out to
Yeah,
Paige.
my main issue with the placement in the bracket is that it's a 7 seed. If it was like a 14 or 15, whatever. But like, it's seated really high for a jam that does what it does.
Yeah, and I'll just say this goes back to my 1230 8-5 argument that the complete piece is more to me than the individual jams.
Yeah.
This song ending the set with the performance that it did, I think it speaks to everything you said, Justin, is spot on. Aside from the fact that it belongs in the bracket, but everything else was perfect. No, but like this is an amazing moment, and they didn't need a cavern afterwards. They didn't need, let's go into Julius because we're at 65 minutes. Like, no, let's just end the set right here. Walk off the stage. We're done. We're good. And it was a great moment.
Final matchup of the Shamu region, we've got the 726 I Never Needed You Like This Before at a 15 seed up against the 8-5 Sigma Oasis at a 2 seed. Both great jams. I give the Sigma the edge here. I don't think it's quite the 2 seed. I had it personally ranked at 19 overall, which is a little bit lower, but it's really good. I think the first half of it, they're still kind of finding their footing. And then when Fishman hits into that like hyperspeed section, that's when the jam and that whole show kicks it off. Great segue into Cities as well. The I Never Needed You Like This Before, I really enjoyed. I don't think they've played it since this show, which is interesting. But I'd like to see this become more of a jam vehicle because I think it does have potential, much like the other ones. Though the song off of Lonely Trip that I'm most needing a jam out of is Never Left Home, which I will dream about forever because it's probably not going to happen.
I ended up going with the Sigma Oasis. I mean, obviously it's a 2 seed, but I scored this as an 8. I scored the Never Needed You Like This Before as a 7. I thought that the Jones Beach jam, it was engaging, it was upbeat, didn't have a ton of momentum, whereas the Sigma Oasis in Atlantic City reminded me around minutes 13 of the Fee into the Jam from Virginia Beach in 99. Just it's like we are on the
yes,
right.
Yes, I'm right there with
it's
you.
like we are on the freeway, and back in 1999, we were doing like 85 miles per hour. We're doing 65 miles per hour here, but we're still trucking.
You're still on the freeway.
We're still
cruising in the
using
right
cruise
lane.
Control. Yeah, we're good to go. And I like how it twists into like a little bit of a psychedelic tinge in the last few minutes of the jam. And as Ryan mentioned, the organic segue into Cities is nice. And for me, when they would come out of jams and go into Sigma Oasis, I was thinking to myself many times, like, this is the best song that they could have picked. This is the perfect song. Sigma Oasis just has such perfect energy just in and of itself as a song. So any jam that comes out of it already like has a little bit of an advantage to my ears.
Yeah, this wasn't particularly close for me. I have Sigma Oasis rated as the 9th best jam of the overall year, which would put it as a 3 seed, I believe. So maybe it's a little bit overrated here, but I also have the I Never Needed You Like This Before as the 63rd best jam or 61st best jam of the year. Let me double 62nd. We're right in there, which would put it as a 16th.
Properly seated.
Pretty properly seated. I'm right there with you. You spoke, Justin, about The I Never Needed You Like This Before is engaging, but it lacks momentum. I thought that this was one of those examples of Phish has a song that they like playing, that they decide either intentionally or on the spot, we're going to take this for a ride. And it just doesn't totally work out. I thought there were good moments, but I don't think that it was a stunning type of excursion the way that the Wave of Hope from Deer Creek, when they took that out for the first time, and it was like, oh my God, this song can jam like this. To your point, Ryan, this was played one more time after the show. It opened up the rained out Pine Knob show, the
Yes.
single set show, which is kind of a perfect song to open up there. But it has not been played since, and part of me wonders if part of the reason is that they just can't wrap their heads around the jam. Though I'm guessing we're going to get a Mexico version of "I Never Need You Like This Before" as we move into 2023 Phish. The Sigma Oasis I have going all the way to the round of 8. Easily beating the
Me too.
420 Carini, easily beating the 1228 Wave of Hope, and then losing in dramatic fashion to the Set Your Soul Free. I mean, just being
A lot of
bombarded.
dramatic beatdowns by that Set Your Soul Free.
That Set Your Soul Free, just it until it gets to the championship round, it just looks completely unbeatable, and then it's tested in the end, but it ultimately comes out on top. But the Sigma Oasis, I couched to it a lot of shows this year, and there were moments where the band just fully connected, and I was just in my living room or on my patio with my kids, just like soaking it all in. And the Sigma Oasis is one of those moments. And every time I went back to it, I was like, this is peak Phish this year.
Yeah, I have it. I think I mentioned earlier, I have it losing to the Mexico Down with Disease in the Sweet 16, which then in turn loses to the Bethel Set Your Soul Free, which is my final 4 pick from this region.
Dramatically losing, or is it a close matchup?
Not quite as dramatic as yours, but it's not as close.
So good, like,
and for me,
15,
I have
20 point beatdown. I get it.
It's not
instead of 40.
It's not quite Georgia TCU, since I know Ryan is watching college football from across the.
I get that. Across the border? Were you going to say across the pond?
I mean, there's a border, and you're on the other side of it.
I think there's a pond too.
Seems fair.
Ontario's
a
pond,
there are some
right?
ponds. There's
a couple
ponds. The great ponds.
But yeah, set your soul free all the way through the Shamu bracket, to say the least.
There we go. All right, and our final region of the bracket, we've got the Moby Dick region, beginning with the juggernaut itself, the 1 seed, the Banger Down with Disease, up against the Everything's Right from Pine Knob at the 16 spot. This is my personal pick to win the whole bracket, the Banger Down with Disease. This, to me, this was the first significant jam of Summer Tour as well, coming off of 2 very underwhelming opening nights at Great Woods. And this is a really bright spot and mostly underwhelming show otherwise. But this jam, to me, is they're all linking up. They're all playing their asses off. Phish does not want to let this jam go. There are so many different times when the rest of the band is maybe like, okay, like we'll stop. And Phish just pushes it into another dimension. Trey is playing really well in this jam. Page, you mentioned earlier, not a ton of organ work from him the last couple of years. He's all over the B3 in this disease, especially in the second half. Just absolutely raging. And yeah, they do kind of land a little clumsily in the ending, but it makes up all the points that it loses for sloppiness because they finished the song after 30 minutes, which I absolutely love, coming off of a series of just unrelenting peaks. Yeah, I'm done talking about it now, but I love it.
Go off, son. It's a great jam. This is your jam of the year. What else do you need to say?
It's true.
Did you, since this was your favorite jam of the year, Ryan, I love it when Trey, and he would do this occasionally, dabbles in like the Mutron, like flute tones that Jerry loved so much in the early 90s. And I got some of that from Trey like 10 minutes in. Also want to give a shout out to like this big, slow, grand march almost that happens around 22 minutes. And if you were a child of the 90s, you might have recognized that as like Rage Against the Machine's Killing in the Name of around 22 minutes, which is like very purposeful. But then if you've listened to your 70s music, you know that that's some Funkadelic Alice in My Fantasies throwback. So a lot
There's a
going on
lot. Yeah.
in the Down with Disease. There, same melody. No offense to Rage Against the Machine, they just kind of borrowed it. But yeah, I had this Down with Disease. It was probably my third or fourth favorite jam of the year, and it easily, obviously, beat the Everything's Right.
I love this Down with Disease. I just want to start by saying that because I have this rated as the 15th best jam of the year. I think I would
Oof.
move this up just looking at what's ahead of it. I think I would move this up to 11th of the year. It's a really, really monumental jam. The segment of music from like 18 minutes to 27 minutes, whatever in there, is just incredible. Phish reminds me a lot of the successes of the 6-5 Sand. There's like a 3-minute segment where Fishman and Trey are just, as you noted, locked in, pushing each other forward, kind of challenging each other, almost like, oh yeah, you're gonna play that fucking hard. Listen to me play right now. And then they just keep going back and forth with each other, which reminds me in a lot of ways of the 10-23-18 Ghost from Nashville, one of
Ooh,
the most
great jam.
underrated jams of 3.0, where it sounds like Mike and Trey are fighting each other for the lead in the jam in the best way possible. So I love this Down with Disease. I have it going all the way to the round of 8, upsetting one of my favorite jams of the year that we're going to get to here shortly. But amazing, amazing jam. Did not ultimately make it to the round of 4 for me because our number 2 jam of this bracket is just, it's too good. It's too good. So, but this was great.
But we'll get there. Next matchup, our final 8-9 here. We've got the 421 Ghost up against the 9-1 Ruby Waves. I went Ruby Waves here. This is a fantastic Ghost. I especially love the point where it sounds like Trey's going back into the song. The rest of the band's kind of like, nah, not yet. And so Trey's like, okay, fuck it, we'll peak it again. And then they get into that like, galloping peak. But I felt like Ruby Waves just had a little bit more to offer with some of these very close matchups for me in the bracket. I went with the one that I felt had more compelling improv.
Yeah, I think it's telling that I had like 2 sentences about the Ghost Jam. And I had a whole paragraph about the Ruby Waves Jam. I love in Ruby Waves how like baked into the song structure itself, we've got some Trey Echoplex, we've got some Page B3, we get a little Trey flute Mutron again, which I mentioned in the last jam, and it's a little aimless, but it works. Whereas Ghost didn't have the best year in 2022, like any great Ghost. From late 1.0, Mike takes over early, like any great Ghost from any period in time, I suppose. But I don't know, ends up a little aimless. So for me, it was the Dick's Ruby Waves.
I'm on the same page with you. This Ruby Waves, this 9-1 show's weirdly underrated. I'm kind of surprised that the Don't Doubt Me did not make it onto this list, which I thought was an excellent jam from the second set. But this Ruby Waves is really, really inventive. It adds to the lore of Ruby Waves jamming. It's just one of their most reliable jam vehicles. The only Ghost I had on my larger list, which did not make this bracket, is the 8-5 version from Atlantic City, where they jam off of the midsection breakdown. It's a really weird, bizarre jam. I liked this Ghost. I liked this along with, I think it was Merriweather Post, maybe one other, where they ended the first set with a really inventive, peaking version. It just ultimately doesn't beat the Ruby Waves for me.
Well said. Next, we've got the 729 Rise Come Together at a 5 seed up against the 227 Golden Age at a 12 seed. Yes, that is a continuation of how they have been playing Jam-Filled Night for the last 2 years. Yeah, this Rise Come Together is a complete shock to me when I saw this on the set list the next day when I was checking. Like, what do you mean they played that for 20 minutes? Like, everything can be jammed now. I really, really enjoy this jam a lot. I think it's a really good, kind of upper middle of the pack 2022 jam. There's not a ton that's like going to put it in like the top 10 or top 20 even, but it's still a really excellent jam. And, I think it makes Rise Come Together more worth hearing when it gets jammed for 20 minutes.
So I have it as the 7th jam of the entire year, the number 7 jam. I think this is
Oh,
amazing. I think that
Wow.
it is threefold. Number one, you've got this terrible song that is jammed out, which makes it really, really exciting.
yep.
Brief aside, I was watching this show on my back patio on a Friday night, and they started playing Rise, and I figured, okay, we're just getting a very first set right now.
Yeah, just go to the bathroom.
I went to go pick up dog shit. That's how I felt. I just went to go clean my yard, and I figured, okay, I'll get this taken care of. I'll come back. We'll watch the end of the set. And I'm around the corner on my side yard, and I hear Trey play these minor chords, and I was like, what is going on? And I
God
was
damn
like,
it, Trey, you're doing it again.
and I was like, they're not going to jam this out. This is, and then it just kept going. And I came back. I just stopped cleaning up after my dogs. I came back to the table, sat down, and was just transfixed for the next 15 minutes. So it's a terrible song that jams. It has a really great initial peak, which adds to it, kind of like the way Sample in a Jar has been used multiple times. But it's that change around 14 minutes where they move into the second part of the jam. And Trey's really featuring the Leslie. It's really bright. It's really colorful. It's really chunky.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. I want to just point out quickly this 227 Golden Age. I think it's a strong jam. I had it as my 38th best jam of the year. This second set of the final night in Mexico is completely overlooked. I think everybody,
That
both
whole show
there,
is.
the whole show is both there and at home was kind of like, okay, night 4 of a Phish run, they're just going to kind of mail it in, and they didn't mail it in at all. And this is a really,
Yeah.
really good Golden Age. I highly recommend people listening
Hey,
to
they
it.
played Fat Man in the Bathtub.
They did. I have this Rise going all the way to the round of 16, and unfortunately losing to the Down with Disease.
Same here.
Yeah, I do have the Rise beating the Golden Age. I like both of them. I loved in the Golden Age, Page on Rhodes or Whirly. Next time I'm listening to this, I'll text Ryan in the middle of the night and ask him which is which. I like the heavy kind of Jedi tone descending licks at the end, but for me, didn't really move the needle too much. And the Rise Come Together, other than just being a jam of Rise Come Together, I kind of felt like we're throwing that, well-known bag of 4.0 tricks just at a new song, which can be satisfactory. I like that it had some both momentum and a little bit of cacophony, kind of as it came home back into the song proper. So, Rise Come Together.
All right, next matchup, we've got the 224 Tweezer at a 4 seed up against the 731 Mull at a 13 seed. I'm happy this Mull made it onto the bracket. I overlooked it on my personal rankings, but it's a very, very good jam. This Tweezer also excellent. First big jam of the year, like barely 40 minutes into the first set of the year, they drop the hammer with a 20-minute Tweezer, which is pretty awesome. Again, this Mexico run from 2022 was absolutely phenomenal. Right out of the gate, you've got these incredible synth textures from Page using that new Prophet that he had just added to his rig. And again, a lot of very clean playing from Trey in this one until a bit later when he starts going synthy, and it ends off with some very lovely teasing of the lizards. So just really fantastic tweezer here. I do have it losing to the Rise Come Together, but it's excellent.
Yeah, this Tweezer coming midway through that single set in Mexico, I think gave a lot of people a ton of understood hope for this overall year from the gates, or right out the gates. Started this Mexico runoff incredibly strong. This Mull, though, you got this version in Deer Creek, the first non-Mike song Mike jams in decades. I mean, since Round Room in 2003, I don't know. I mean, we've had a faux 555 jam, the freaking song that sounded like it was going to be a jam vehicle at its debut and decided not to be. I don't know why. Let's just play a tampered down Little Feat impersonation here. But Mull, which combines 6 different elements of Mike Gordon's songwriting inspiration, finds just like brilliant improvisational segment. It's not enough to beat a really solid tweezer. A tweezer I think is slightly, if not extremely overrated by many in the community. I have it losing pretty handily to the Rise Come Together in the second round, but it definitely wins
Would you
here.
say dramatically, or
I
just
would.
handily?
I would say,
How
yeah,
many
I would say
points?
handily. I would say
A
that this
dramatic
is
handily, a dramatic handled victory. I don't know where I'm
so.
going
What
with
this
this.
is a 5 seed beating a 4. This is like a classic Marquette team from the 1990s beating up on like a Gonzaga. It's a 15-point win. It was never in question, but they didn't embarrass them.
Okay.
I appreciate the fact that they did jam out Mall. These are very close for me. I think probably there's a little bit of like, this was one of the first jams of the whole year. So the tweezer gets a little bit of extra like space in our memories. I think that's like a thing, attendance bias, but also like time space bias. But the Mall, even though I picked the tweezer, just to shout out the Mall, uh, this to me kind of feels like let's throw the bag of 4.0 tricks at the new song, or at least the new jamming opportunity, and see what works. But Trey's Echoplex sounds like a helicopter in the jungle, is what something that I
Ooh.
wrote in my notes. So this is good stuff. And yeah, this is one of the better Mike songs. I'm not going to say that about all the new Mike songs, but I actually like Mullen. I think it's
Agree.
kind of an earworm.
I'm right there with you.
Love
I'm
it.
right there with you.
Is Jason Sudeikis mentioned in this song? I don't think so.
Next up, we've got the 6 seed June 1st Simple from Charleston up against the Bethel, Cross-Eyed, and Painless at an 11 seed. This is a fantastic Simple. There were some, I actually completely forgot about this jam until a couple of weeks ago when I went back and was doing some re-listening, but really, really excellent jam here. Again, we talked about right at the beginning of the bracket how like the Charleston run was kind of weird and like kind of inconsistent, but this is a phenomenal jam.
Yeah, I've got this as the 26th best jam of the year. I've got the Cross-Eyed as the 45th. The Simple kind of does everything that Phish does really well in a condensed 23-minute segment. There's some dissonance, there's some peaking, there's some kind of candy colored, effects laden jamming. It's a really fun, pleasurable, non-challenging jam vehicle, and I love it, and I've gone back to it many times. It's kind of been one of those jams that if I wanted to hear something good from 2022 Phish and I didn't really know what it was, I just put this Simple on. It was really, really solid. I think this Cross-Eyed has been slightly underrated throughout the year. I'm glad to see it here as an 11 seed. It's a strong spot for it. It does some stuff jam wise that we just don't usually hear out of Cross-Eyed, which reminds me in a lot of cases of the 1017 2014 version that just skews off into a darker tinged melodic area that we usually hear Cross-Eyed go into this upbeat funky jam. This doesn't really do that, and I really like that about it. It leads well later in the set to the Set Your Soul Free, but I've got Simple winning here and losing in the next round to the number 3 seed.
Yeah, and it was a close matchup for me. I also have Simple advancing and then losing in the next round to Sand from MSG later in the year. The Cross-Eyed felt kind of grown up to me. It had sort of a mature feel as it utilized the 4.0 tones, but didn't, necessarily just hokily go back into the Cross-Eyed theme. There's a little bit of a Down with Disease, like descending rift, a minor key vibe halfway through the jam that I like. But for me, it was the Simple. It's not breaking the mold. I felt like the Charleston run, because I remember watching it on the webcast early out here on the West Coast time zone. It was great. They jammed, but it didn't feel like it moved into any necessarily new groundbreaking territory.
Agree.
So I did ultimately end up going with the Simple, but it was a bit of a wash here, to be honest.
Yeah. Next matchup, we've got the 3 seed 1230 Sand up against the 14 seed Charleston Set Your Soul Free from 531. Again, the other kind of huge jam from Charleston opened the run with a 20-minute jam. I overlooked the fact that I very overrated this in my ranking. I had it at number 8 overall, which, Brian, you're usually good at pointing out when I have something like an outlier like that that's like not actually where it belongs in the slightest. And yeah, it slipped past me, and I was filling out my bracket, and I was like, what? Then I listened to it, and I realized I should have it like 20 or 30 spots lower. So I apologize for how that may have impacted the seating. Luckily, it's a 14 seat, so I don't think it's super overinflated.
Was that the show opener?
It was a show
Part
opener.
of my okay.
And
Yeah.
the re-entry back into the song is a violation of the Geneva Convention.
So well said.
It's not good.
So well said.
But this Sand, on the other hand, I was losing my mind when it was being played because of the fact that they go into a split open and melt jam like twice, two different occasions. This Sand is amazing. I love Sand's kind of return to big jam vehicle status the last couple of years. It was really, for most of 3.0, it was just like, okay, except for obviously a few big versions, it was like, okay, we're going to get a 10-minute set closer here that's maybe going to have a little extra mustard, or it's going to be energetic. But now they're jamming it out again, which is awesome. And this Sand is very, very excellent. Yeah, I have it beating the Simple, and then losing to the 2 seed in the Sweet 16.
Yeah, it's so the Set Your Soul Free I don't have in my bracket, partially because it's so sloppy and the re-entry is so bad, that I rebelled against it. I said I'm not doing this. This Sand, if you guys want to kick me off this podcast after what I say here in a second, I understand it. I have this as the best Sand of the overall year. It's my 12th.
Look at this guy.
It's my number 12 jam of 2022. The riffing that Trey gets into, the teasing, the weird jam segments, the way that he distorts melodies. I mean, this takes everything that was so brilliant about the third quarter of 12:30 and just extends it into this fourth quarter jam vehicle that is taking a song that for so long in 1.0 and then in 2.0 and then in parts of 3.0 was really just a Mike and Phish are going to play the same thing, and Trey's going to kind of loop over it. It's long and slightly boring if you listen to a lot of those 99 2000 versions. It gets to this kind of musical space that they were chasing, but it doesn't do a ton. They figured out a way out of that, and they figured out a way into these really unique jam vistas that I'm all about. And so I've got this easily beating this abhorrent 23-minute show opening, Set Your Soul Free, a moment that we should all be celebrating, but beating the Simple, and then losing to the number 2 seed in the round of 16.
Yeah, I have the Sand winning pretty handily, and then going on to beat the Simple to get into the Sweet 16. For me, 2 things I want to mention about the Sand. I love how Trey gets into a little bit of Pink Floyd territory deep in the jam. Sounds like Run Like Hell.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also love at the end of the jam how it goes back into Sand, but doesn't like just slip and stay there. It kind of toggles back and forth between Sand and then just jamming, which I thought was really, really clever and really adept. So yeah, Sand was strong. I mean, I'm not crazy like Brian, so I prefer the Deer Creek Sand, but both of these Sands are very strong. And this one definitely moves on a couple rounds for me.
For sure. Final 2 matchups. We've got 7 seed 527 Soul Planet up against the 10 seed 9-3 Split Open and Melt. I went Melt here. This is a good Soul Planet. We are not getting into the quadraphonic toppling debate here. This is not. We're not even going to mention it again. I have now said that. It's not happening. This Melt is just amazing. The highlights from the Dix run were awesome. They're just, a little bit few and far between. This Melt had such purpose, gets there in such a relatively short amount of time, and just really goes into that, space, angry alien cloud jam stuff while still being very cohesive. And that's kind of what you want from a Melt. That's what the best Melts are. And I think this is a really good example of it. It's not making it more than one round, but I do have it with the upset here.
I went with the Soul Planet. I don't think that they play quadraphonic top lane. I think that it is a element of quadraphonic top lane within the Soul Planet, which to me adds to the brilliance of this Soul Planet. I think it's a jam that Soul Planet is a lot like Ruby Waves. 9 times out of 10, they're going to start playing this song and you're going to hear a lot of casual fans groan. And by the end of it, everyone's going to be cheering because it's going to be a super inventive and unique jam. And this Soul Planet goes to a place that I absolutely love improvisationally. I love the Split Open and Melt. 9-3 is the best set I saw all year of Phish, but it's one of those sets versus jams. I love the Kill Devil Falls from that set. I love the Sigma Oasis. I love the freaking Thunderhead. They played Thunderhead. I love the MoMA Dance. The Split Up and Melt, they could not have ended the set with a better song. And I think you said it perfectly there, Rye. Like, it gets off the rails, but still is in control. And that's what a lot of that set felt like. It felt like a lot of those jams could have gone on for 5 or 6 more minutes, but they decided to make a better song selection and then jam that song out rather than push that jam out. And that loses a few points for me in the individual jam basis. And the Soul Planet, just it's a relentless jam. I love it. It loses quite handily in the next round against the number 2 seed, but it's a good win in round 1 for me.
Mm-hmm.
And they were both close. I had the Melt ranked as 7.5. I had the Soul Planet ranked as a 7. For me, in the year of our Lord 2022, I just appreciate when we can take a dark Phish Jam and keep it dark, which is exactly what they did with this Melt. Whereas I'm not one to complain about Phish. I'm glad we have Phish, but I'm not looking to have my stashes bliss jammed, and it just hurts my heart when we are celebrating.
Such a good point.
So do you not
stash
like
jams.
Do you not like the Amsterdam stash then?
No,
that's like the mother of all bliss jams.
Well, yeah, but that gets messy and it goes out but I mean, when we're like in a bliss jam at like 7 or 8 minutes into a stash like that,
when we just go from minor to major and then we're just
right
there and then it's over. The stash from Amsterdam, that's one of the best Phish jams of all time.
That's fair.
Right. It's fantastic, but I appreciate that we read the room and we kept our dark jams dark. So for me, it was Melt.
All right, and our final matchup of the bracket, guys, we made it. We have the 8-13 Alpine Fluffhead at a 15 seed up against the 4-23 No Man and No Man's Land at a 2 seed. Obviously, as the seeding would suggest, this is not a competition. Jammed out Fluffheads are cool. There's yet to be one that I really feel deserves a spot on the bracket. The Chula one made it last year off of a few minutes of improv as a 16 seed. And we had 2 more jammed out versions this year, which is pretty crazy because, the only other jammed out version was in 1999. So it's cool. It's a solid jam for sure. The callback to the 1999 Alpine Valley version with the 1999 opener into Fluffhead and to Saw It Again. Very, very cool. But this No Men on the strength of the improv is, destroying this Fluffhead, obliterating, if you will.
This is an obliteration. This is
not even dramatic. It's
just
like Fluffhead.
No bars.
No men let Fluffhead score a couple of baskets against them to be nice. I made a sports analogy.
We're very proud of you. This is Georgia TCU in the football college championships recently.
I'll do you one better. This is Liberty University makes it to the NCAA Final Four, and everyone on Fox News is standing up and going, "Oh my God, look at this! It's Liberty! What a great example!" And then they get matched up against Michigan State, and Tom Izzo coaches a great team to beat them like 85-23, and everyone else in America is like, "Yeah, fuck Liberty University, get the fuck out of here." So 8-13 was my favorite Phish show I saw all year. My favorite show, which again, I'm a master of bad opinions. I understand this is not a popular opinion at all. I loved this show. I loved the structure of this show. I had amazing seats for this show. I loved the weather at this show. I was not on the lawn. I sorry to everyone who was on the lawn that got drenched for half this show. It was a cool summer night in the mountains of southeastern Wisconsin, one of my favorite places in the whole world. Got my first 1999, goes into Fluffhead. And I remember thinking as they were going through Fluffhead, last time I saw Fluffhead, they jammed it. They're not going to do that again. That was a one-time thing. And then they jammed it. And they jammed it into Saw It Again. And it was a better jam than the Chula Vista version.
Yeah.
But I agree with you, Ryan. The best Fluffhead jam that we've heard outside of 1999 was 1230. And even that didn't make this bracket for some reason compared to this version. I think that it was a better jam overall. It's still not worthy of being on this other than for like the shock value nature of it. I will say just one last thing about Fluffhead. It's insane to me that they can figure out a way to jam out of Fluffhead and they can't figure out a way to jam out of Bowie. Like Fluffhead is moving towards the peak and they find a way to get out of it. And Bowie has this like natural boom, and they can't figure out a way to jam out of that. Like this like chord that goes into silence and they could just do anything with that palette and they don't. That's my one little nitpick. This No Man's Land I think is a perfect jam. I think 27 minutes is kind of the sweet spot for the best Phish jams. It gives you enough of like 3 segments of jamming. It gives you enough time to evolve. It gives you a great solid peak. It gives you some good post-peak jamming. I have this going all the way to the final 4 and losing to my eventual champion, the Set Your Soul Free from Bethel. It's beautiful. The way that, it kind of speaks to the same sort of thing I was saying about the final night of Mexico this year. Phish sometimes has this tendency on the final night of a 4-night run to be a little exhausted. And rather than being exhausted on those 2 final nights, they came out and just absolutely owned the room and left everybody either in the building or at home webcasting with the sensation that it was a really, really strong run. So I love the Snowman. I listened back to it a bunch of times this summer and the fall and into the winter. Every time I listened to it, I heard something new. And that to me is a testament to a great jam.
Yeah, I thought No Men's was really great. This was probably the toughest Elite 8 matchup for me in the Moby Dick bracket. I ultimately went with Down with Disease, but the No Men is no slouch. Page is really strong in this jam, and he kind of encourages, especially around 17 minutes with his synths, some like very grandiose full band soundscapes, which is exactly what I'm looking for with Phish. So shout out to Paige for that. And it doesn't necessarily take a typical path to wrap up the jam. The only thing I want to say about the Alpine Valley Fluffhead is this late 1.0 Stan really appreciated hearing Trey in his siren loops around 14 minutes.
Yeah.
Way to bring him back, buddy. If we could just get Trey's keyboard out again and have him do a little dinkin' and dunkin' on the keyboard,
Dude.
maybe 15 minutes into a sand, we'd be cooking with gas. But it's all about the No Men's for me.
I had a moment when that happened where I started screaming in Alpine, and this guy turns around to me and he goes, "The sirens are back!" And I just I was like, we get each other right
yeah.
now.
So it's like awesome. Trey, you know about the sirens. You know that we want the sirens.
The place exploded when he started doing that. It was so cool.
Yeah.
I feel like he did a rig rundown video. I don't know if it was recently or one he had done in the past where he was doing the sirens. He was like, yeah, we used to do this a lot. We don't do this anymore.
Yeah, that was the one in 2012. He was like, yeah, we used to do that for like 15 minutes. Like, nah.
Bring it back.
Yeah. It's like, no, we want it. All right. And that brings us through the entire Phish 2022 Jam of the Year bracket. Thank you, Brian and Justin, for getting through this 2+ hour podcast with me. It has been a pleasure.
This was great.
Yeah, it was fun. And we've texted a little bit this week. It was really fun to like fully nerd out with you guys talking about all these jams.
We're gonna keep doing that.
2022 wasn't 2021, but it really had some great moments and more than I recollected. So it was rewarding to go through. And I encourage everyone to give all of these jams in the bracket a listen.
Mm-hmm. And we will be back here next January for the Goose Jam of the Year 2023 bracket. But that's in a year, and there's a lot of Phish.
The Goose Jam. I better bone up.
Did I say
and
Goose?
The Phish Jam.
Did I say
You
Goose?
did.
Yeah,
You did.
You did.
Oh, yeah, you know what? I'm my brain sometimes has a hard time switching back and forth between the two. There will be a Goose Jam of the Year 2023 episode next January. It just won't be with you guys.
we have one jam on that bracket right now that, as you and I have discussed, will probably fall off by midsummer if it's a good year of Goose. But we got to see. Mexico is 4 weeks away. We got to see what Phish is going to do, because I'm sure we're going to have a couple jams from that bracket if this bracket is any indication.
Yes, very much looking forward to that. And don't forget to get involved in the voting of the bracket starting Monday, January 30th, which is incidentally the day this podcast comes out. So get involved with the voting over on the Phish.net forum. You will see the thread. Super, super easy. Thank you to anybody who's made it this far, obviously, in the very long episodes. I'd like to give a shout out to anybody who's still listening to this podcast. We appreciate you.
You win a prize.
The prize is you get to participate in this bracket knowing that you listened to the entire podcast about it.
That's a good prize, because we gave good bad opinions. This is 2.5 hours of good bad opinions.
Exactly.
Thank you, Ryan, for hosting us. Justin, it is always a pleasure to talk to you, and I can't wait for what we've got 9 months to go, I think, until we get to hang out again in the greatest soccer stadium in America.
Can't wait. Wouldn't be Kansas if we weren't watching Phish over Labor Day weekend somewhere east of Denver. I'm pumped.
Awesome. All right, and thank you so much for listening to this episode of We Move Through Stormy Weather. Have a fantastic day. See you next time.